Yeah, he's the interim dean. Took a job as the and then do they have, are they like up already? Do they know how to?
Oh, yeah. And so that one, so
This one's on, okay.
just an FYI.
Okay, great, so I can tell John that he can,
Talking to this.
okay,
You hear it back there?
yeah,
So,
okay, that's
hot
great.
mic.
Awesome, I'll
All right.
tell John that when he
Testing.
comes up.
Testing. Testing.
Should I ask him why my microphone's not working? Mine's not.
Hey, Andrew, Amanda said that her mic is.
Hello. Oh, maybe it is. Is it? Testing. Oh. You're so good at technology.
Testing. Okay.
Hello,
works.
Logan.
Okay. Can you hear it on the live stream? You can't.
Happy birthday, Mom.
Let's see. Can you?
Testing.
Hello, this is Logan. Can you hear me on the live stream?
Turn the plus sign.
Loudly or
Testing.
louder? Clearly? Beautiful.
Testing.
Hi, family.
Testing. Can you hear mine? Testing.
Testing.
Still no?
Testing.
Testing. Yeah. Testing.
Testing.
Testing. I could kind of hear that.
Did I turn? Okay. Hi.
Testing.
Hello?
Is that good? I asked you. I think you know. Basically, right talking, which is good. Yeah. Thanks for your help. Broadcast.
That's what I was saying. That's what I was saying. I was wondering which station.
Good evening. Thank everyone for being here. Tonight we have 4 2Ls from the Trial Advocacy Board who will compete in teams of 2 for the award of Best Advocates of the Trial Advocacy Board Internal Competition. In that vein, and representing the plaintiff, we have Amanda Schaefer and Logan Sudholtz. And representing the defense, we have Sydney Harris and Brett Spradley. Please join me in congratulating them on this honor. Next, I'd like to thank our jurors for tonight's trial. Each of our jurors are local attorneys and several are Charleston School of Law alumni. To all of our jurors, I sincerely thank you for being here tonight and supporting the program. Before I introduce our presiding judge for tonight's trial and turn the room over to her, there are a few housekeeping matters from Professor Chapman. First, don't forget to validate your parking tickets. Second, please wait until breaks if you're going to exit or enter the courtroom. So if you need to use the restroom, please wait for breaks and don't do it while presentations are going on. And third, please turn off your cell phones if you have not already. And now, it's my privilege to introduce our presiding judge to you. Sitting on the bench presiding over tonight's trial is the Honorable Judge Molly Cherry. Judge Cherry was appointed to serve as a United States Magistrate Judge for the United States District Court, District of South Carolina in July of 2020. Prior to taking the bench, Judge Cherry worked in private practice at Next and Pruitt for over 20 years. And before that, clerked for U.S. District Court Judge David Norton. Judge Cherry, we thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Your Honor.
First order of business, I'm not sure which attorney may have attempted to bribe me with a gift. There is no name on it. I have not opened it, and it will not work. So I understand we handled pretrial motions in our earlier conference, but I do want to check with counsel before we begin if there are any housekeeping matters. I'll start with plaintiff's counsel.
Yes, Your Honor, and we are prepared to make a notice of appearance if Your Honor is ready for that. We do have a written notice of appearance with our name spelled out on it, as well as a full copy of the trial notebook. Would Your Honor like a copy? May I approach?
Any objections from defense counsel that you've seen the trial notebook?
All good with us, Your Honor. We do as well have a notice of appearance whenever Your Honor is ready to receive that as well.
All right.
Your Honor, permission to give a written notice of appearance to the jury.
Any objection from defense counsel?
None, Your Honor.
Your Honor, as it says on the written notice, my name is Amanda Schaefer. I'm here with my co-counsel, Logan Sudholtz.
Good evening, Your Honor.
And we represent the estate of Peter Jones. Whenever Your Honor is ready, we do have 4 housekeeping matters. Your Honor, during pretrial conferences, the parties stipulated to the admissibility of 2 exhibits. Those are exhibits 25 and 26. We would ask that Your Honor move them into evidence at this time.
That's correct, Your Honor. No objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next, for the purposes of this trial today, Sky Stebbins and Blair Schaefer are stipulated to be experts in skydiving. I just wanted to bring that stipulation to Your Honor's attention.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. Next, Your Honor, in this jurisdiction, whiteboards are permitted. We do intend to use one during a witness exam today. I just also wanted to bring that stipulation to Your Honor's attention. And lastly, Your Honor, the exhibits are pre-marked. May they retain their original marking regardless of the order they're introduced?
They may, unless any objection from defense counsel.
None, Your Honor.
That's fine. We'll proceed in that manner.
Thank you, Your Honor. And with that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed with opening statements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I understand there's some housekeeping from defense counsel. Is that correct?
Good evening, Your Honor. Yes, ma'am. And we do also have a notice of appearance, if Your Honor would like that as well. May I approach? And may I publish one to the jury as well? Your Honor, defense does have 4 housekeeping matters to attend to. The first, we just wanted to bring to your attention that Exhibit 18 in this case is pre-admitted into this trial. Specifically, those are just some free fall calculations done by one of the experts today, specifically Ms. Sky Stebbins. We just wanted to bring that to your attention, Your Honor. And then second, we would ask for constructive sidebars for purposes of the objections. In other words, that all objection arguments be heard outside the presence of the jury constructively.
Okay, I will raise with counsel, my preference is not to have speaking objections if it's a matter that can clearly, the objection can clearly be raised by reference to a rule number and a concept, but to the extent the court needs further explanation, we will handle it in sidebar.
And would you prefer that we ask for that constructive sidebar, or are we free to assume that that constructive sidebar is occurring once that argument's
We
made?
ask for sidebar.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Without asking any objections will be addressed in front of the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. Third, we would ask just to move. Third, Your Honor, we would just ask to be able to move freely about the well for purposes of opening statement, direct and cross-examination, and then closing argument, Your Honor. And then lastly, we just wanted to bring your attention a specific rule in this jurisdiction, specifically Rule 5, and I believe that is in your trial notebook, Your Honor. Mid-trial motions are allowed in this jurisdiction. However, Your Honor is required to deny those motions. So for purposes of time, Your Honor, we just wanted to bring to your attention that we won't be making a motion for directed verdict at mid-trial point.
Statistically, it's probably going to be denied anyway.
Thank you, Your Honor. And with that, we are prepared to move to opening statements.
All right, then we'll start with opening. Please, you may begin.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. The answer is in the silence. It's June 21st, 2023. Peter Jones, a world-renowned actor, is filming a stunt for his new movie, All Lost 7, produced by the defendant Dragon Studios and its owner, Cole Doig. But little does Peter know, these will be the last 22 seconds of Peter's life. Peter gets on his motorcycle. He starts heading up the ramp going 80 miles per hour. As he reaches the edge of a cliff, a timer begins to count down the 9 seconds until Peter must receive the signal to open his parachute. 1 second, Peter shoots off the edge of the cliff and he is in the air. 2 seconds, Peter lets go of the motorcycle. Now the only thing left saving Peter from hitting the ground is the parachute on his back. 3 seconds, Cole Doig and Peter's agent watch from the control room nearby. Everybody knows their rules. Cole Doig knows when that timer hits 9 seconds, he needs to tell Peter to open his parachute. Otherwise, Peter won't know when to open his parachute. 4, 5, 6. Peter is still plummeting towards the ground, waiting for Cole Doig to give him the signal to pull. 7. Cole Doig is watching Peter's altitude, and he is watching the clock. 8. Cole Doig knows in 1 more second, he needs to give Peter the signal to open his parachute. Cole Doig knows that it is not safe to wait any longer than 9 seconds. 9 seconds. This is it. This is the moment Cole Doig needs to give Peter the signal to open his parachute. Peter's agent looks at Cole Doig expectantly, waits for Cole Doig to say pull. But Peter's agent hears Cole Doig say nothing. Just silence. 10, 11, 12. Still silence from Cole Doig. Peter's agent is shouting at Cole Doig to say pull. 13, 14, 15 seconds. Cole Doig finally picks up the walkie-talkie. Still silence. A few seconds later, Peter's body hits the ground, and Peter dies on impact. Cole Doig and Peter's agent race to the bottom of the mountain, and standing there above Peter's lifeless body, grief-stricken, His agent turns to Doig and shouts, "Why didn't you give the signal at 9 seconds?" Doig says nothing. No explanation, no apology, and no denial. Just silence. The answer to what caused Peter Jones' death is in Doig's silence. Good evening, members of the jury. My name is Amanda Schaefer, and I'm here today with my co-counsel, Logan Sudholtz, and we represent the estate of Peter Jones. Now, Peter Jones was a very hardworking actor, but more importantly, Peter was a devoted family man. Peter was a husband, and Peter was a father to 3 wonderful daughters. Now, the defendant, Dragon Studios, is the movie production company that was filming All Lost 7 when Peter Jones died. But members of the jury, you just heard me say the name Doig. So it is very important to understand that Doig is the owner of Dragon Studios. So anything Doig does will be legally treated as if Dragon Studios did it. And throughout the trial today, you're going to hear about 2 different stunts. You're going to hear about the stunt that Peter performed on June 20th. That's the original stunt that there was a contract for, that everyone, including Peter, signed and planned for. And then you're going to hear about a new stunt that Doig had Peter perform for the very first time on June 21st. That's the stunt that Peter Jones died performing. Now, we're suing Dragon Studios for the death of Peter Jones on June 21st, 2023. As the plaintiff, we have the burden of proving that Dragon Studios was negligent. And members of the jury, by that, I just mean we must prove it was Dragon Studios' failure to exercise ordinary care that was a substantial factor in causing Peter Jones' death. And that's a burden that we gladly accept and plan on exceeding, because the evidence today will show what Dragon Studios could have done to keep Peter Jones safe, should have done to keep Peter Jones safe, and would have done to keep Peter Jones safe, except that Doig wanted to film a longer scene. Let's talk about my first point. The evidence today will show what Dragon Studios could have done to keep Peter Jones alive during All Lost 7. Throughout the trial today, you're going to hear from 2 different skydiving experts, and each will tell you that additional precautions could have been taken. Sky Stebbins, Dragon Studios movie stunt coordinator, will testify today about a little piece of equipment called an altimeter that measures a skydiver's own altitude as he falls. You'll hear that Dragon Studios could have had Peter Jones wear an altimeter, but without it, Peter couldn't tell his own altitude. And Sky Stebbins will tell you that the reason Peter was not wearing an altimeter for All Lost 7 is because Doig thought it would look weak and distracting. And even the defendant's own expert, Blair Schaefer, will be forced to admit that he would have had Peter Jones wear an altimeter for his skydives. But members of the jury, listen to all the other things Dragon Studios could have done to keep Peter Jones safe. Because the evidence will show Dragon Studios could have used computer-generated AI, or could have had Peter jump from a higher elevation. But you'll hear that Dragon Studios chose not to do any of those things. Which leads me into my second point. The evidence today will show what Dragon Studios should have done, like follow the contract or the stunt plan, to keep Peter Jones safe during All Lost 7. Sydney Gaskins, Peter's agent, now that's the one who watched Peter fall to his death, will tell you that the only stunt in the contract was that original June 20th stunt. You'll hear that the June 21st stunt, the day Peter Jones died, was never referenced in the contract. Cole Doig will even take the stand and be forced to admit that he only planned to do that original June 20th stunt. Cole Doig will tell you that the June 21st stunt, the day Peter Jones died, was never a part of the original plan. Which leads me into my final point. The evidence today will show what Dragon Studios would have done to keep Peter Jones safe, except that Cole Doig wanted to film a longer scene. And Cole Doig will testify to that himself. When Cole Doig takes a stand, listen as he tells you that he would have stuck to that original plan to film on June 20th, but he thought that the June 20th stunt felt insubstantial. You'll hear that Cole Doig thought the June 20th stunt was too short. So Cole Doig will tell you he then had Peter Jones perform a new stunt on June 21st, where Cole Doig would wait longer until 9 seconds to tell Peter to open his parachute. But Cindy Gaskins, Peter's agent, will tell you on June 21st, Cole Doig never yelled pull at 9 seconds or even at all. You'll hear that Cole Doig's silence left Peter unaware of when to open his own parachute. But members of the jury, on June 21st, after Peter fell to his death, listen closely as Cole Doig says, Cindy Gaskins asked him, "How could you do this?" And you'll hear that Cole Doig responded, he wanted a longer scene. Cole Doig will then be forced to admit Cindy Gaskins shouted at him, "Why didn't you give the signal at 9 seconds?" And the evidence will show that Cole Doig was silent. Cole Doig will be forced to admit that he did not even deny it. The answer to what caused Peter Jones' death is in Cole Doig's silence. And at the end of this trial, after you hear all of the evidence, we will ask you to find the defendant, Dragon Studios, and Cole Doig negligent, and to hold Dragon Studios responsible for causing Peter Jones' death. Thank you for your time.
May it please the court. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. Peter Jones knew the script. He just didn't follow it. I want to begin today by addressing the nature of this situation. This was a tragedy, nothing short of it. And you won't hear a single person deny that today. But the truth of the matter is that this case involves risk. That risk, unfortunately, has come with irreversible consequences. It's June of 2022. Peter Jones, the star of the hit movie series All Loss, and the movie's production company, Dragon Studios, sit down to discuss a stunt for All Loss's newest installment, All Loss 7. Peter Jones was the star of the first 6 movies, and he's the star of the 7th. At that meeting, Peter Jones accepts the risk of death in a contract outlining the stunt. It's scripted that he's going to get on a motorcycle and drive it up a cliff. over 2,700 feet above ground level. And then he's going to drive it off that cliff. With no harness, he's going to let go of his motorcycle and begin to skydive. 4 seconds later, he'd be given the signal to pull by Dragon Studios. And then, without hesitation, Peter would then pull his parachute. Now, in theory, all of this sounds pretty dangerous. But the evidence is going to show that Dragon Studios required more than enough practice. That Dragon Studios went above and beyond to ensure Peter's safety. In fact, over the course of a year, Dragon Studios hired safety personnel just for this stunt. There were calculations conducted to ensure a safe landing for Peter Jones. There was an entire practice facility built just for Peter Jones. Who paid for all of this? The evidence will show Dragon Studios did. Now, over the course of the trial today, the plaintiff has the burden of proving to you that Dragon Studios caused Peter Jones's death. And while we as Dragon Studios need not prove anything to you, we have elected to prove to you two things. Peter Jones accepted the risks of the stunt, and Peter Jones caused his own death. Now, earlier I was describing a contract that Peter was involved with that required him to do the stunt. And originally that contract only required him to do it on one day. And that ended up being June 20th. Now, on June 20th, Peter did the stunt successfully 6 times. But the next day, on June 21st, the stunt is done again to make the scene longer. Members of the jury, listen closely to the reason why. Peter Jones says that he wants this stunt to be as long as possible. And Peter says that he can wait until 10 seconds before being given the signal to pull. But instead, it's decided he will be given the signal to pull at 9 seconds. So, Peter Jones does the stunt again on June 21st. And the evidence will show you today that the signal to pull was given exactly at 9 seconds. But Peter didn't pull. Peter didn't respond. And after being told to pull, he continued. Peter Jones continued to fall. And after he didn't respond, he was told to deploy 3 more times. Deploy, deploy, deploy. 10 seconds, 11 seconds, 12 seconds, 13 seconds, 14 seconds, 15 seconds. 15 seconds after leaving that ramp, Peter Jones finally pulls his parachute. The evidence will show you today that that's 6 seconds after he's given the first signal to pull. And you're going to learn that that's 6 seconds after what was scripted. Now, Peter's parachute deploys, and he begins to slow, but it wasn't enough. Peter hit the ground. Peter Jones knew the script. He just didn't follow it. Members of the jury, my name is Brett Spradley, and I'm accompanied by co-counsel Sydney Harris. We represent Dragon Studios Incorporated. And while we understand that our client is technically the company Dragon Studios, we want to help you understand a bit more about them. This is Cole Doig, and I am honored to represent Cole's company. You see, Cole owns Dragon Studios. Cole was Peter's friend and coworker. Cole was the person who wanted Peter safe. Cole didn't want this. Dragon Studios wanted to ensure Peter's safety. Now, earlier I told you about the burden that the plaintiff has. Now, we as the defendant, again, don't have to prove anything to you today, but we have elected to prove to you two things. I told you that was that Peter Jones accepted the risk of this stunt and that he caused his own death. We're going to prove those two things to you in three ways. One, the evidence will show that Peter Jones knew the dangers of the stunt. Two, the evidence will show that Peter Jones accepted the dangers of the stunt. And three, the evidence will show that Peter Jones went off script when doing the stunt. So let's take those one at a time. One, the evidence will show that Peter Jones knew the dangers of the stunt. You're going to hear from Cole Doig, the owner of Dragon Studios, today. And Cole's going to explain to you about some of the previous stunts that Peter did for other All Lost movies. Cole Doig is going to explain to you the knowledge that Peter had in planning and executing those stunts. You're going to hear from Sidney Gaskins, Peter Jones's Hollywood agent, whenever they testify for the plaintiff. Sidney's going to tell you about a time where Peter explained in an interview how dangerous this stunt was. Second, Peter Jones accepted the dangers of the stunt. Members of the jury, you're going to see the contract where Peter Jones accepts the risk of death. You're going to hear from Sky Stebbins, the stunt coordinator for this movie, whenever they testify for the plaintiff. Sky Stebbins is going to tell you that Peter Jones refused a stunt double. Third, the evidence will show you today that Peter Jones went off script when doing the stunt. You're going to learn that the signal to pull was given exactly at 9 seconds. You're also going to hear from a skydiving expert today, Mr. Blair Schaefer. He's going to explain to you that both stunts on June 20th and June 21st were safe. He'll explain to you that Peter Jones was qualified to do these stunts. He'll explain to you that Dragon Studios provided adequate safety measures for Peter Jones. And Mr. Schaefer is going to explain to you that in his opinion, as to what led to the cause of Peter Jones's death, was that Peter was given the signal to pull, but that he did not respond. Peter Jones knew the script. He just didn't follow it. Members of the jury, before we get deeper into this trial, I want you to understand what this incident was. It was tragic. It was heartbreaking for Peter's family for his friends, for the owner of Dragon Studios, Cole Doig. But today, you all will have the power to tell us whose fault this was. And after all of the evidence has been seen, all the testimony has been heard, we're going to ask you to side with Dragon Studios. Because the evidence will show that Peter Jones knew what he was getting into. And that Dragon Studios wanted to ensure his safety. Members of the jury, Peter Jones knew the script. He just didn't follow it. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, at this time, plaintiff calls Sydney Gaskins to the stand. Good evening, Ms. Gaskins. Can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good evening. My name is Sydney Gaskins.
Ms. Gaskins, what do you do for a living?
I am a licensed attorney as well as a Hollywood agent.
What agency do you work for?
I own my own agency.
Who do you work with?
I work with a bunch of different actors, but the ones that you all would probably know best was Peter Jones.
Ms. Gaskins, how do you know Peter Jones?
Peter Jones was my first client, probably my favorite too. He was just such a family man with 3 great kids. I was his agent for every movie he was ever in.
You said was. Do you still work with Peter Jones?
Well, Peter Jones tragically passed away on June 21st, 2023, doing a motorcycle stunt for his last movie.
Prior to his passing, what movies was Peter Jones best known for?
So yeah, he was best known for his role in All Loss. It quickly became a franchise in 2018. So that's what he probably was known best for.
Can you briefly describe for the jury the All Loss franchise?
Peter Jones played Travis Harper, and he was known to take on missions as a super spy. And the movies were most known for their gorgeous international locations, as well as their stunts.
How many All Lost movies are there?
There are 6, but Peter was filming his 7th when he tragically passed away.
Okay, Ms. Gaskins, let's talk about All Lost 7. You said that these movies involved stunts. What was the stunt planned for All Lost 7?
So Peter was to drive a motorcycle off of a cliff in a mountain in Norway. And he was supposed to let go of the motorcycle midair and skydive down solo and then parachute to the ground.
What was your role in All Lost 7?
Well, I was his agent.
And as his agent, what was your role?
I would accompany him on set, and prior to filming starting, I would negotiate all of his contractual agreements pertaining to his movies.
Did Peter enter into a contract pertaining to All Lost 7?
Yes, as well with an attached stunt plan.
Ms. Gaskins, if you were to see copies of this contract with the attached stunt plan, would you recognize them?
I would.
At this time, I would like to direct the court and opposing counsel's attention to what has been pre-admitted as Exhibits 25 and 26. Your Honor, permission to approach the witness. Permission, Your Honor, to publish to the jury. Ms. Gaskins, I have just handed you the contract for all Law 7 as well as the attached stunt plan. Do you recognize them?
I do.
Who is all involved in this contractual agreement?
Yeah, so Peter Jones was my client who died, and then Dragon Studios was the movie production company who was owned by Cole Doig, who signed right here.
And big picture, Ms. Gaskins, what is outlined in this contract?
The obligations of Peter Jones and Dragon Studios.
According to this contract, what specifically did Peter Jones agree to do?
Yeah, so if you look at the second paragraph right here, Peter agrees to follow the instructions of the studio and its designees regarding all aspects of production.
And when the contract says studio, who is it referring to?
The defendant, Dragon Studios.
What did Dragon Studios promise in return?
Safety.
Where do we see that outlined in this contract?
That's going to be right here in the same paragraph. It says the studio agrees not to ask the performer to do anything that exposes the performer to an unreasonable risk of harm.
Anywhere else?
Yes, so they also talk about safety in the last paragraph here as well.
And who drafted what we have marked as Exhibit 26?
So Dragon Studios actually hired their own professional stunt coordinator, Sky Stebbins. So Sky Stebbins drafted the stunt plan.
Did Dragon Studios agree to adhere to this stunt plan?
Yes, as you can see on the contract, they agreed to adhere to it.
Did Peter Jones agree to these protocols?
Yes, Peter Jones also does.
Did Peter Jones accept any risks according to this stunt plan?
Yes, of course.
What stunt did Peter Jones accept the risks of?
Well, only the stunt outlined here in Exhibit 26.
And was the stunt written in the stunt plan ever actually performed?
Yes, it was performed on June 20th, 6 times.
According to that stunt plan, when was Cole Doig to give Peter the signal to deploy his parachute?
Well, if you look at the stunt plan, it says 4 seconds.
So when Peter Jones performed this June 20th stunt, where was everyone located?
So Peter Jones was on his motorcycle, ready to drive off the cliff, and me and Cole Doig were in the control room where there was a screen where we could see on set, and that screen had a clock counting down the seconds.
Why were you in the control room?
I was his agent.
Why was Cole Doig in the control room?
Well, Cole Doig and Dragon Studios ensured to keep Peter Jones safe. So for that reason, as well, he had an obligation to tell Peter when to pull his parachute to deploy safely to the ground.
How many times did Peter Jones perform this stunt on June 20th?
He performed it 6 times.
How successful were these June 20th stunts?
They all went perfectly.
Well, if that's the case, Ms. Gaskins, then what day did Peter die?
Unfortunately, he died on June 21st, the next day, after Cole Doig went home and decided that there needed to be a new stunt plan.
Why was a new stunt created?
Well, Cole Doig said that the scene from June 20th was a little bit too short, and he wanted Peter to wait a little bit longer to pull his parachute.
At any time, was a new contract written for this new June 21st stunt?
No, there was no new contract.
Did Peter ever practice this new June 21st stunt?
No, Peter had practiced hundreds of times for the June 20th stunt, but he never practiced the stunt that was to be done on June 21st.
How long did Cole Doig plan to wait on June 21st to give Peter the signal?
9 seconds.
So on June 21st, when Peter Jones performed this new stunt, where were you?
I again was in the control room.
Where was Cole Doig?
He was with me in the control room.
What was Cole Doig's role on June 21st?
The exact same as before, to ensure his safety and tell him to pull when he was supposed to.
And on June 21st, at 9 seconds, did Cole Doig give Peter the signal to pull?
No, he did not.
So, Ms. Gaskins, when 9 seconds passed on the clock and Cole Doig wasn't giving Peter the signal to pull, how did you react?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
really want sidebar, or do you want everyone to hear what is said?
We'll do a constructive sidebar so
Okay.
everyone can hear.
This is, jury, stick your fingers in your ears. Okay, so I'll hear from you.
Your Honor, this is an exception to hearsay under Rule 803-2, excited utterance. This witness is watching her good friend fall to his death, and the producer is not yelling pull.
Your Honor, this is hearsay. They're offering a out-of-court statement for the truth of the matter asserted. This does not fall under the exception of excited utterance. There is no stressful situation occurring at this time.
Counselor, someone falling to the ground doesn't constitute a stressful situation.
Yes, Your Honor. The testimony that she's eliciting is prior to his death and falling to the ground.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I'll allow it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I will ask that question again, Ms. Gaskins. So when 9 seconds passed on the clock and you realized that Cole Doig was not giving Peter the signal to pull, how did you react?
I began to panic, and I screamed at him to tell Peter to pull.
And as you're screaming at Cole Doig to give Peter the signal, how did Cole Doig respond?
He was silent. At one point, he put his hand up like this to me, as if he wanted me silent as well.
And as Peter is falling toward the ground, did you remain silent like Cole Doig?
No, I kept yelling at him to tell Peter to deploy.
When did Cole Doig finally give Peter the signal on June 21st?
Never. He never told Peter to deploy.
So how did the June 21st stunt end?
Well, Peter was going pretty fast to the ground. He eventually reached the ground and he didn't get up.
Ms. Gaskins, what did you do when you realized Peter wasn't getting up from this stunt?
Cole Doig and I, we took a helicopter to the scene. His body was laying there. His face was unrecognizable.
Ms. Gaskins, what was your reaction in that moment?
I looked at Cole Doig again and I said, "How could you do this?"
And when you asked Cole Doig, how could you do this? How did he respond?
He said, and I quote, "I wanted a longer scene."
No further questions, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Gaskins, you were just testifying about June 21st. That's day 2 of filming the stunt for All Lost 7, right?
Yes, that's correct. It's day 2 of filming.
You testified that Cole Doig said that the scene from June 20th was a little bit short.
The scene was cut short. He wanted a longer scene so he could wait and pull the parachute at a later time. Yes.
Let's talk more about that. You were with Cole Doig and Peter at the end of filming the stunt on day 1, right?
Yes, I was.
You were there when Cole Doig approached Peter with the idea of filming the stunt again on day 2.
Yes, I was there.
Cole Doig said he thought the footage from day 1 was too short to be compelling.
Yes.
And then Cole Doig offered Peter multiple options to fix that problem, didn't he?
Yes, to shoot the scene again.
Cole Doig offered for Dragon Studios to duplicate some footage to make the scene longer.
Yes, to shoot the scene again.
Ms. Gaskins, is it your testimony today that duplicating footage from June 20th is equivalent to shooting the scene again?
I mean, I would just say that he wanted to do the scene again.
But he offered options other than doing the scene again, right?
Sure.
So I'll re-ask that earlier question. He offered for Dragon Studios to duplicate some footage to make the scene longer instead of refilming the stunt.
Sure.
He also offered for Dragon Studios to splice in some close-ups to make the jump scene longer.
Sure.
But Peter didn't say yes to any of those options, did he? Instead, Peter said, "I can wait until 10 seconds.
Yes, Peter loved what he did. He wanted to shoot the scene himself.
And Ms. Gaskins, you even tried to change Peter's mind.
Of course, it's a very risky, dangerous stunt.
But Peter's mind was made up.
He wanted to do the scene himself.
Now, we know Peter ultimately died filming the stunt for All Lost 7, but there were 6 All Lost movies before that, right?
That's correct.
And Peter was the lead actor in all 6 of those movies.
Yes, he played Travis Harper.
And each of those movies, all 6 of them, included unbelievable stunts.
Yeah, the movies were known for their stunts.
And Peter came up with the idea for all of the unbelievable stunts in all 6 of those movies.
He liked to do them, yes.
It was Peter's idea to hang 5,000 feet off the side of a mountain in All Lost 2.
He agreed to do those stunts, yes.
It was Peter's idea to hang from an airplane in midair for All Lost 5.
Objection, Your Honor. This is improper character evidence.
Your Honor, we are not offering this evidence for any propensity purpose. We're offering it to show that Peter has knowledge in planning and executing stunts, as well as knowledge in the risks associated with those stunts, not for a propensity purpose.
These stunts aren't even skydive stunts. These are stunts pertaining to several of the All Lost movies that were filmed prior to this movie at hand. So it would just confuse the jury to think that he's accepting and assuming the risks of stunts that aren't even related to what we are talking about today.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll ask that question again, Ms. Gaskins. It was Peter's idea to hang from an airplane in midair for All Lost 5.
Yes.
It was even Peter's idea to do the motorcycle jump, which he ultimately died performing for All Lost 7.
Yes, well, he agreed to do the motorcycle jump that is outlined here in the contract in Exhibit 25.
Is that a yes, Ms. Gaskins?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Gaskins, Peter didn't use body doubles for any of these films, did he?
No, as I said, he liked to do the stunts himself.
Never.
Never.
Because Peter insisted on doing his own stunts.
Yes, he liked to do the stunts himself.
Now, Ms. Gaskins, you know what CGI is, right?
Sure, yeah.
That's computer-generated imaging.
Yes.
CGI can make it look like an actor performed a stunt, even if they didn't.
Sure.
But Peter didn't want that, did he?
No, he wanted to do the stunts himself.
Take All Lost 7, for instance. Peter jumps off of a cliff on top of a motorcycle for that movie.
Yes, he did do that.
0 CGI.
Correct.
Because Peter said doing his own stunts made it better for the audiences.
Yes.
In fact, Peter told you he loved doing stunts that no other actors would do.
Yes.
Ms. Gaskins, let's talk more about the All Lost 7 stunt. I'm going to show you the contract for All Lost 7. At this time, I would direct the court and opposing counsel's attention to what has already been admitted into evidence as Exhibit 25. Your Honor, would you like a copy? May I approach the witness? Do you have a copy already?
I do.
Ms. Gaskins, you have Exhibit 25 in front of you. You recognize it, right?
I do.
This is the contract for All Lost 7?
Yes.
And you signed this contract. That's your signature there at the bottom?
Yes, I did. I was his agent.
And Peter signed this contract too.
He did.
So you were there for negotiations of this contract, weren't you?
I was.
So you agreed to all of the terms in the contract?
Yes, to this contract, I did.
And one of those terms is performer accepts the risks, including the risk of death.
Yes, the contract says that.
In fact, you were there for an interview Peter gave in June of 2023 about the All Lost 7 stunts.
Yes.
And in that interview, Peter was talking about some of the risks associated with the All Lost 7 stunt.
Yes.
Peter said he knew there was a chance he could hit the mountain wall.
Yes.
Peter said he knew there was a chance his parachute wouldn't open.
Yes.
Peter said he knew there was a chance that he would open his parachute too late.
Yes, there is always that chance with these type of stunts.
And Ms. Gaskins, Peter admitted to knowing all of those risks in that interview, didn't he?
In that interview, yes.
In fact, that's why he wanted to film the stunt first, even though the scene doesn't occur until the second half of the movie.
Sure.
Because Peter said, and I quote, "If I don't survive this stunt, There's no point in having the rest of the movie already filmed.
Sure.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Gaskins, earlier you testified that Cole Doig said at the bottom of the mountain, "I wanted a longer scene." Do you remember that?
I do.
Take us back to those critical moments at the bottom of the mountain. When you said to Cole Doig that you wanted to know how he could do this, and he responded, "I wanted a longer scene," how did you respond?
I again looked at Cole Doig and I said, why did you not give him the signal at 9 seconds?
And did Cole Doig explain it?
No.
Did Cole Doig apologize for not giving the signal at 9 seconds?
No.
Ms. Gaskins, did Cole Doig deny it?
No, he never denied it.
So, Ms. Gaskins, when you accused Cole Doig of never giving Peter the signal at 9 seconds, did he say anything at all?
No, he was silent. It will forever be the loudest silence I've ever heard.
No further questions. Permission to retrieve the statement, Your Honor.
Plaintiff calls Sky Stebbins to the stand. Your Honor, permission to ready the well. Thank you.
Ms. Stebbins, will you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes.
Good evening. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good evening. My name is Sky Stebbins.
Ms. Stebbins, where do you work?
I work at Bruin Productions. It's my stunt production company, and I am also a movie stunt coordinator there.
How long have you been a movie stunt coordinator?
10 years.
Now, Ms. Stebbins, what kind of training did you need to do to become a movie stunt coordinator?
Well, I was a stunt double for 10 years, and I also became certified as a stunt performer. I also took a series of classes in high altitude and low opening jumps, and I taught stunts for a period of time.
Now, Ms. Stebbins, what exactly does a movie stunt coordinator do?
Well, a movie stunt coordinator typically designs stunts and also ensures the safety protocols.
All right, Ms. Stebbins, the jury just heard about Peter Jones' death in All Lost 7. Did you know Peter Jones?
I did. I worked with Peter on 6 movies, including this movie, The All Lost 7.
And what is your involvement in this movie, All Lost 7?
Dragon Studios hired me to design and coordinate the original stunt and to ensure that Peter performed the stunt safely.
Ms. Stebbins, what stunt are you referring to?
The stunt where Peter drove off the ramp on his motorcycle going 80 miles an hour and then went directly into a skydive. That is, of course, the original stunt.
And for that original stunt that you worked on, what safety protocols did you provide Dragon Studios with?
I provided the free fall calculations and I recommended what equipment Peter should wear.
Now, was the original stunt you worked on ever performed?
It was.
And what day was the original stunt performed?
On June 20th, 2023.
Is June 20th the day that Peter Jones died?
No. Peter Jones died on June 21st while performing the stunt that Cole Doig, the owner of Dragon Studios and the producer of All Lost 7, coordinated himself.
So what was the primary difference between the original June 20th stunt that you worked on and the new June 21st stunt that Cole Doig designed?
Well, in both stunts, Peter was to drive off of a ramp and parachute down, with Cole Doig using CGI to make the ramp look like a mountain. But the primary difference was the amount of time that passed between when Cole Doig was to give Peter the signal to pull.
How long did Cole Doig want to wait before giving Peter the signal to open his parachute?
9 seconds.
Did you agree with 9 seconds?
No, I did not.
Why not?
Based on my extensive calculations, I believed Dragon Studios and Cole Doig should give Peter the signal at 4 seconds.
All right, Ms. Stebbins, let's discuss those extensive calculations that led to your protocol that Cole Doig needed to give Peter the signal at 4 seconds. What was your process in coming up with that protocol?
I relied on industry standards for elevation to do the free fall calculations.
Now, Ms. Stebbins, what are the industry standards on elevation for skydiving?
Well, most skydivers fully deflate their parachutes at 4,000 to 5,000 feet above ground level.
Let the record reflect, I am now writing 5,000 and 4,000 and writing most.
Your Honor, may I reposition in order to see the board?
However, the average skydiver opens their parachute fully at 3,000 feet above ground level.
Let the record reflect, I am now writing 3,000 and rating average.
But industry standards and the limit on a safe skydive is 2,000 feet above ground level.
Let the record reflect, I am now writing 2,000 and abbreviating industry standard. Now, Ms. Stebbins, for the original plan you worked on, what elevation did you want Peter's parachute fully opened by?
2,000 feet.
And to be fully opened by 2,000 feet, when did Peter need to pull open his parachute?
Well, that gets us into the bigger conversation of how long it actually takes Peter to fully inflate his parachute.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it takes Peter a total of 4 seconds to fully inflate his parachute. 1 second for Peter to actually pull, and 3 seconds for Peter's parachute to fully inflate. And all of that has to be done before Peter reaches below 2,000 feet.
So how did you determine the exact second Cole Doig needed to give Peter the signal to open his parachute?
I did the free fall calculations.
And would you recognize your free fall calculations if I showed you them today?
Yes, I would.
At this time, I would direct the court and opposing counsel's attention to what has been previously admitted as Exhibit 18. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Your Honor, permission to publish Exhibit 18 to the jury. Ms. Stebbins, I just handed you Exhibit 18. Do you recognize it?
I do.
What is it?
These are the free fall calculations that I did for the stunt that was done on June 20th.
Now, before we get into the free fall calculations, can you briefly describe to the jury what free fall calculations even are?
Yes, well, as Peter is in the air, he's obviously falling as time goes on. This left-hand side of the exhibit shows how fast Peter is falling to the ground at what elevation. For example, at 6 seconds, Peter is at 2,197 feet.
Now, Ms. Stebbins, you just told me that most skydivers open their parachute at 5,000 or 4,000 feet. Where is 5,000 or 4,000 on your chart?
Well, I didn't even include it because Cole Doig wanted Peter to start at 3,000 feet in order to get better footage.
Could Cole Doig have had Peter start from a higher elevation?
Yes, of course he could.
All right, Ms. Stebbins, in order to be fully inflated by 2,000 feet, how long would it take Peter's body to fall to that 2,000 feet?
No later than 4 seconds. This would ensure that Peter's parachute was fully deployed by 8 seconds, and Peter's body would be at 2,000 feet.
So did Cole Doig give Peter the signal at 4 seconds?
Yes, he did on June 20th when we performed the stunt 6 times, and each of those times it was successful.
Well, what about on June 21st when Peter did Cole Doig's new stunt?
On June 21st, Cole Doig did not follow my safety protocols, and instead, he gave Peter the signal at 9 seconds, and as a result, Peter died.
All right, Ms. Stebbins, let's discuss that new June 21st stunt where Peter died. Now, were you there on June 21st?
No, I was not. We were never supposed to film June 21st. We filmed on June 20th, and after 6 successful takes, I went home.
Did you know that Cole Doig wanted to do another take on June 21st?
I did. He asked me what I thought about it on June 20th.
Well, what did Cole Doig say when he asked you?
He told me that he wanted to do another take of the stunt, but this time wait until 9 seconds to give Peter the signal to pull.
Why?
Cole Doig said to me that he wanted Peter to wait as long as possible to pull in order to get more film footage.
So if Cole Doig gave Peter the signal at 9 seconds, what elevation would Peter's body be at by the time his parachute is fully opened?
Well, based on my calculations, this would mean that Peter's parachute was fully deployed by 13 seconds, which would make Peter just at 1,000 feet above ground level.
And knowing that from your extensive calculations, how did you react to this?
Objection, hearsay, calls for hearsay.
Your Honor, I'm not eliciting a statement. I'm just asking about what this person thought of the new plan. And even if a statement is elicited, it is an exception to hearsay under 8033 as it goes to her mental state and her impression and her intent and plan, as I expect and anticipate that she will say she did not want to do the new June 21st stunt.
Your Honor, again, this would be a statement, out-of-court statement being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. This witness's reaction does not necessarily go to their plan in that situation, but merely to her reaction as to the situation.
I read 8033. It doesn't include a statement. No. I'm pull the objection.
I'll ask it again. Knowing that from your extensive calculations, what did you think about the June 21st stunt?
There was no way I was going to allow Peter to do that stunt. Having Peter fully deployed at just at 1,000 feet is cutting it way too close.
So how did Cole Doig lead this conversation?
Cole Doig indicated to me that he wasn't going to perform the stunt on June 21st.
Your Honor, permission to retrieve the exhibit from the witness. Ms. Stebbins, what other protocols did Cole Doig reject on behalf of the defendant, Dragon Studios?
Well, I also wanted Peter to wear an altimeter that tracks Peter's elevation. It's like a small wristwatch that skydivers can wear.
Why did you want Peter to wear an altimeter?
So that just in case anything was to happen, Peter would have a second chance at survival.
Ms. Stebbins, how is it that something so small, the size of a wristwatch, can provide Peter with a second chance of survival?
Well, as I said, if something bad were to happen, like for example, he didn't hear the signal, all he had to do was check his watch and see what elevation he was at and know when to pull.
Was it possible for Peter to just look down at the ground and know it was time to pull?
No, skydivers can't reliably see what elevation they're at when skydiving over mountains and grass like Peter was.
So did Peter Jones wear an altimeter for all Lost 7?
No, he did not.
Why not?
Because Cole Doig indicated he thought that Peter would look distracted and weak if he was checking his watch while filming.
Ms. Stebbins, do you know whether Cole Doig's new stunt was actually performed?
Yes, it was.
Was Cole Doig's new stunt performed successfully?
No. The only time that Peter performed Cole Doig's version of this stunt, he fell to his death.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Stebbins, just want to clarify something real quick. You are here to testify on behalf of the plaintiff, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And that would make sense because you and Peter Jones were friends outside of work.
Yes, that's correct.
In fact, your families and your spouses, they were close outside of work as well, right?
Yes, we were very close.
And Peter Jones, he was generous to your family.
He was. Peter was a very generous person.
He gave you a Lamborghini.
Objection, relevance.
Your Honor, this goes to this witness's credibility, specifically to their bias in this situation and testifying. So I'll ask that question again, Ms. Stebbins. Peter Jones gave you a Lamborghini.
Yes, it was a Lamborghini he had in a movie. He gave it to me.
And he paid for your son's college tuition too.
Yes, he did. As I said before, Peter was really generous.
So it would make sense that you would be here to testify on his behalf today.
Yes.
But Peter's generosity to your family, that's not the only reason that you're here today, is it?
No, not at all.
In fact, you're required to be here today.
That's correct.
Ms. Stebbins, isn't it true that you were originally named as a defendant in this lawsuit?
Yes.
Meaning that Peter Jones's family sued you,
Yes, because I was the stunt coordinator hired.
meaning that you would be sitting next to Dragon Studios at this defendant's table today, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Except you settled with the plaintiff, right?
Yes, we did.
And they released you from any liability in this case.
That's correct.
And in exchange, you agreed to testify on the plaintiff's behalf today, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So you mean to tell this jury this evening that the same folks who originally sued you are the same people who have you on the stand today testifying on their behalf?
On Peter's behalf, yes.
So earlier you talked about your involvement with the stunt plan in this case. That's Exhibit 26. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
This time I'd like to direct the court and opposing counsel's attention to what's already been admitted, Exhibit 26. Your Honor, do you need a copy? Let the record reflect I'm showing opposing counsel Exhibit 26. May I approach the witness? Now, Ms. Stebbins, I believe earlier you referred to this stunt plan as your stunt plan, right?
Yes, that's correct. The original stunt.
So I'm going to read your stunt plan aloud, and I'd like you to follow along with me. Here underneath the number 3, you write, to ensure performer safety, the following precautions and preparations will be taken. Performer will prepare by completing at least 500 skydives and 500 motocross jumps. Now, Dragon Studios, they required that of Peter Jones, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Next, you recommend that the studio build a set where performer can practice riding a motorcycle off a ramp and releasing from a motorcycle. And Dragon Studios built that set, right?
Yes, that's correct.
You then write that the studio will use computer software to calculate the trajectory of the performer and the motorcycle, allowing the studio to safely position drones during the stunt. And Dragon Studios did that, right?
Yes.
You also recommend that the performer's backpack contain a ram air parachute, and Peter had that.
Yes, that's correct.
You recommend an identical reserve parachute, and Peter had that.
Yes, he did.
And then you lastly recommend that the performer wear an earbud headphone connected to the control room.
Yes.
Peter had that.
Yes, he did.
You know what I don't see in your stunt plan, Ms. Stebbins, is any mention of an altimeter. Your stunt plan doesn't mention an altimeter, does it?
No, it doesn't.
So let's talk about whenever Peter Jones actually did the stunts on June 20th and June 21st. Now, from my understanding, June 20th, that's the first day, right?
Yes.
June 21st, that's the second day.
Yes.
That's the day that Peter Jones died.
Yes, that's the day he died.
Now, on June 20th and June 21st, Peter was jumping from the same cliff, wasn't he?
Yes, the ramp.
And on June 20th, all of those stunt attempts were successful. weren't they?
Yes.
And on Peter Jones's first attempt on June 20th, he wasn't wearing an altimeter, was he?
No, he wasn't because Doig didn't want him to.
On that second attempt, he wasn't wearing an altimeter, was he?
No.
On that third attempt, he wasn't wearing an altimeter, was he?
No, he wasn't.
In fact, Ms. Stebbins, on any of those successful attempts, Peter Jones never wore an altimeter.
No, because Doig didn't want him to.
And your stunt plan, it didn't include the mention of an altimeter either, did it?
No, because Doig didn't agree to that.
So that's a yes.
Objection asked and answered.
So that's a yes, Ms. Stebbins?
It's a no. It doesn't include that.
So your stunt plan doesn't include the mention of an altimeter?
No.
Thank you. So let's talk about June 21st. Now, you testified earlier that you weren't there that day,
Correct.
meaning that you weren't in the control room with Sidney Gaskins or Cole Doig.
No, because we weren't supposed to film that day.
So you saw nothing that day in the control room with your own eyes.
No.
You heard nothing in the control room that day with your own ears,
No, I didn't. I wasn't there.
meaning that you can only speculate as to what happened in the control room that day.
That's correct.
Ms. Stebbins, let's talk about what you do know about June 21st. You do know what the plan was that day, right?
Yes. I mean, I didn't know that Doig was going to do it. He indicated that he wasn't going to.
Cole Doig told you that the plan was going to be for Peter Jones to be given the signal exactly at 9 seconds.
Yes, that's what he said.
Cole Doig told you that the plan was for Peter Jones's parachute to be open above 1,000 feet.
Yes, and he told me again that he wasn't going to do that.
And you would agree with me from a technical standpoint that if a parachute is open above 1,000 feet, that's safe.
I mean, technically, however, most experts would not okay that.
So that's a yes.
Yes, technically.
So you'd also agree with me that the altitude at which a skydiver should open their parachute depends on their skill level.
That's correct.
And you would agree with me that Peter Jones was an expert skydiver.
Yes, he was.
Ms. Stebbins, you do know that Peter Jones agreed to do this stunt, right?
Yes.
And that's because he did the stunt.
Yes, that's correct.
And you know that Peter Jones was willing to take risks.
Objection, improper character evidence.
Your Honor, if I may. We're offering this again to show Peter Jones's knowledge in planning and executing stunts would generally incorporate the risk associated with them.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'll ask that question again, Ms. Stebbins. You know that Peter Jones was willing to take risks.
Yes, I did know that.
And you're aware that Peter Jones said that he wanted this stunt to be as long as possible.
Yes.
And Ms. Stebbins, that's because he told you he wanted this stunt to be as long as possible.
He did.
Nothing further.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Stebbins, opposing counsel was just asking you about it being technically safe to wait until 1,000 feet to have your parachute fully open. Have you ever waited until 1,000 feet to have your parachute fully open?
No. And most experts would not.
No further questions, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. Plaintiff rests its case. No, Your Honor.
No motions, Your Honor.
Let me ask my jury, if anyone in the take it. Otherwise, we're going to move straight to the defense witness. Anybody need a break? All right. Okay. The defense may call its first witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Blair Schaefer to the stand. Good evening, Mr. Schaefer. Could you?
Mr. Schaefer, could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do, Your Honor.
I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Schaefer, could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Of course. My name is Blair Schaefer.
What do you do for a living, Mr. Schaefer?
So I'm actually an expert skydiver. I also own my own company, Free Fall Consulting, which does skydiving training. We also work with other skydiving companies to create skydiving courses and design and improve those courses.
Why did you become involved in this case?
So I became involved in this case due to my extensive experience in skydiving, along with my background in the area, and I was brought in to evaluate the safety of the two jumps undertaken by Peter Jones on June 20th and June 21st to see if they were safe.
What qualifications do you have in skydiving?
So I'm actually certified by the American Skydiving Association as a expert skydiver, an instructor, and an instructor trainer, which means I'm certified to teach others how to teach skydiving. I'm also certified in parachute rigging, parachute operations, base jumping, aerial maneuvers, and a number of different areas in the skydive field.
And how long have you been in the skydiving industry?
I've been in the skydiving industry for over 30 years now.
During those 30 years, about how many skydives have you completed?
I've completed over 20,000 skydives, and 16,000 of those have been as an instructor.
Mr. Schaefer, have you ever testified as an expert witness before?
I have. I've testified as an expert witness on 3 occasions. This is my 4th.
In those 3 other cases, what were you testifying as an expert in?
I was testifying as an expert in skydiving.
And what were those other cases about?
Those other cases involve skydiving fatalities very similar to the one we're here today for.
Have you ever dealt with skydive fatalities in the course of your own career?
I've not personally. I have a 0 loss record, which I'm very proud of. That means no clients or trainees have ever died under my supervision as far as skydiving. But again, I do have background in skydiving fatalities from my participation in those previous cases.
Let's talk about how you form your expert opinions. Generally speaking, when you testify in a skydiving case, how do you form your expert opinions?
I rely on industry standards. So I look at the facts of the case and the facts surrounding the actual skydive, and then I use the generally accepted principles of the American Skydive Bar Association, and I apply those principles to the case at hand.
Did you rely on those same industry standards to form your opinions for this case?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What all did you do to inform your opinions for this case?
So I reviewed all of the material provided for me revolved around the death of Peter Jones. This included videos of both skydives from June 20th and June 21st. This also led to review of the photos of the skydive location, photos of the equipment. I looked at the equipment itself. I also reviewed the transcripts from all of the depositions from all of the witnesses in this case, and I actually used the same equipment Peter Jones used to perform the skydive myself.
Are all of the expert opinions you form drawn to a reasonable degree of certainty in your field?
Yes, they are.
So after reviewing all of those materials, what expert opinions have you formed for this case?
So I actually formed 4 separate expert opinions in this case. The first expert opinion I formed is that Peter Jones was qualified to perform the stunts in the All Lost 7 movie. The second expert opinion I formed was that Drag Studios provided Peter Jones with adequate safety resources to perform these stunts. The third expert opinion I formed was that the stunt plans on June 20th and June 21st were to a reasonable degree of safety. And the final expert opinion I formed in this case is that Dragon Studios and Cole Doig performed those stunt plans properly in this case.
Okay, so that was a lot of expert opinions. So let's take those one at a time. Starting with your first expert opinion, you testified that Peter Jones was qualified to perform the All Lost 7 stunts.
I did.
What makes you say that he was qualified?
So his skills training in this case. Dragon Studios had Peter Jones do several jumps prior to the Norway jump. He was also provided training on motorcycles. This included aerial training, so he knew how to release the motorcycle while he was in the air.
Let's move on to your second expert opinion. You testified that in your expert opinion, Dragon Studios provided Peter Jones with adequate safety resources.
Yes.
What makes you say that he was provided with adequate safety resources?
So on top of all the training Dragon Studios had Peter Jones do before performing the stunt, Dragon Studios also hired Bruin Stunts as a safety consultant in this case. This gave Peter Jones access to the best safety experts and support staff.
What safety equipment did Dragon Studios provide Peter Jones?
Dragon Studios provided Peter Jones with a primary parachute, along with a reserve in case the primary failed. They also provided him with headphones so he knew when to pull the cord and deploy his parachute.
And what makes you say that that safety equipment was adequate?
So I actually looked at the equipment itself, and this equipment, I looked at the parachutes, and there was no evidence of a parachute malfunction in this case. And I looked at the actual headphones themselves, and they were in proper working condition even after the accident. And I used this equipment myself to perform the actual stunt.
How did that stunt go?
It went well. The parachute deployed properly, and the headphones worked perfectly. There were no issues.
So, did Dragon Studios implement every single possible safety precaution available to skydivers?
No, they didn't, but they weren't required under their contract with Peter Jones to provide every single safety precaution at all. And in my expert opinion, the safety precautions they did provide in this case were adequate.
Let's move on to your third expert opinion. You testified earlier that in your expert opinion, the skydives undertaken by Peter Jones were reasonably safe.
Yes, the skydives taken by Peter Jones were reasonably safe in all aspects in this case.
What makes you say they were reasonably safe in all aspects?
So the skydives on June 20th and June 21st were fairly straightforward as far as skydives go.
What do you mean by fairly straightforward?
Well, after Peter Jones actually released the motorcycle, the skydive just became a normal skydive like any other. The weather that day wasn't bad. There was no swirling winds, no lightning storm. There were no other aerial objects in the air. There were no airplanes, no other skydivers, lots of open space, making it a fairly straightforward jump.
So, how many days did Peter perform this reasonably safe skydive?
So he actually performed this reasonably safe skydive on 2 occasions, on June 20th and then again on June 21st.
And in your expert opinion, were both of those skydives reasonably safe?
Yes, both of these skydives were reasonably safe in all aspects.
What was the primary difference between the two skydives?
The primary difference between those 2 skydives was the amount of time Peter Jones would wait before pulling the cord to deploy his parachute.
How much time was Peter going to wait to deploy his parachute on June 20th?
Peter Jones was going to wait 4 seconds before deploying his parachute.
And in your expert opinion, did waiting 4 seconds allow Peter to open his parachute soon enough?
Yes, 4 seconds was reasonably safe. It gave Peter Jones plenty of time to deploy his parachute.
How long did Dragon Studios plan to wait before giving Peter the signal on June 21st?
Dragon Studios planned to wait 9 seconds before telling Peter Jones to deploy his parachute.
And in your expert opinion, did waiting 9 seconds allow Peter to open his parachute soon enough?
Yes, in my expert opinion, waiting until 9 seconds would allow Peter Jones to have his parachute fully inflated by 1,000 feet. And if someone's parachute is fully inflated by 1,000 feet, no one is dying.
Mr. Schaefer, I'm going to show you what we've already marked as Exhibit 18 in this case.
Of course.
At this time, I would direct the court and opposing counsel's attention to what has already been admitted into evidence as Exhibit 18. Your Honor, would you like a copy? May I approach the witness? Mr. Schaefer, I've just handed you Exhibit 18. Do you recognize? What is it?
This is the body and freefall calculations for Peter Jones, and this was prepared by Sky Stebbins.
And how do you recognize it?
This is one of the many documents that I looked over informing my expert opinion on this case.
So do you agree with the calculations in Exhibit 18?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay, so you just testified that no one is going to die if their parachute is open and fully inflated by 1,000 feet.
That is correct.
So according to the calculations on Exhibit 18, how long would Peter's body have to fall before he reached 1,000 feet?
So if you look at these calculations, you can go down to the 13-second marker, and aligned with that is 1,041 feet. So that would have been the marker.
And what does that mean?
So that means before the 13 seconds, Peter needs to pull his parachute to have it fully inflated by 1,000 feet.
So when would Peter need to pull his parachute for it to be fully inflated by 13 seconds?
So Peter's parachute takes 3 seconds to fully inflate. So if we start at 13 and we go back 3 seconds, that would mean that Peter needs to pull his parachute at 10 seconds to have it fully inflated by that 13-second mark that I just mentioned.
And what is the significance of 10 seconds?
So as I mentioned earlier, the June 21st skydive plan had Peter Jones pulling his parachute at 9 seconds, which is ahead of the 10 seconds that I just mentioned, allowing his parachute to be fully inflated by 1,000 feet. This makes that 9-second mark reasonably safe.
Mr. Schaefer, let's move on to your fourth expert opinion. You testified earlier that in your expert opinion, the skydive was properly executed by Dragon Studios.
Yes, Coldoy just had to provide the signal at 9 seconds.
And when did Coldoy give the signal?
Coldoy gave the signal at 9 seconds.
So in your expert opinion, did Peter execute the skydive properly?
No, Peter did not properly execute the skydive. He was given the signal to pull, but didn't do so.
And what is that opinion based on?
So this is based on the fact that the stunt plan in this case was reasonably safe. Coldoy provided the signal at 9 seconds for Peter Jones to pull, and Peter Jones provided all of the safety resources that were adequate in this case. And so the only conclusion I'm left with is that Peter Jones didn't listen to the signal and didn't pull.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Schaefer, you were retained by the defendant in this case, correct?
That is correct.
Meaning Dragon Studios is paying you for your testimony today.
They are.
In fact, Dragon Studios is paying you $2,000 for you to testify for them.
That's the correct amount.
And for your deposition testimony, Dragon Studios also paid you $2,000.
They did. They paid for the service.
And for your review of the file, Dragon Studios also paid you $5,000.
They did. I have to review the file to be able to make my opinion in a case like this.
And you reviewed everything in the file,
I did.
every deposition,
I did.
every exhibit.
Yes.
So when everything comes to an end, Dragon Studios would have paid you $9,000 for you to testify for them?
That is correct. I don't offer my services for free, so that would be the correct amount.
All right, I want to talk about your first expert opinion, that Dragon Studios gave Peter Jones adequate resources for his skydives.
Okay.
Now, by resources, you just mean like equipment.
Yes, and the training, and then the, yes.
Well, let's stick to the equipment. And by equipment, you mean parachutes, headphones, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Now, we can both agree that an altimeter is also a piece of equipment.
It is a piece of equipment, yes.
And earlier you testified you relied on the industry standards when forming your opinion.
I did.
So you do know that it is industry standard for a skydiver to wear an altimeter as he falls.
That is industry standard, yes.
And that's because an altimeter is a way for a skydiver to measure his own altitude as he's falling.
That's correct.
And anyone flying solo should wear an altimeter.
I would recommend it, yes.
Well, Mr. Schaefer, Peter was flying solo on the day he died.
He was.
Yet Dragon Studios told Peter Jones not to wear an altimeter.
Correct.
And that's not the choice you would have made.
It's not, but they were still able to provide through the headset the signal to pull.
And it's not the choice you would have made because by not wearing an altimeter, Dragon Studios went against the industry standard that you relied on.
That is correct.
All right, Mr. Schaefer, I want to shift gears and talk about your second opinion that the June 21st stunt was reasonably safe.
Yes.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 18 while we discuss that.
I've already got it.
Perfect. Now you have Exhibit 18 in your hand, and you do recognize that as Sky Stebbins' freefall calculations?
I do.
And you agree with all of Sky Stebbins' math in these calculations?
I do.
Now, Mr. Schaefer, the industry standard of when a skydiver's parachute should be fully open is 2,000 feet, correct?
That is correct.
Let the record reflect, I am now drawing a green circle through the 7th and 8th line and abbreviating industry standard. Now, you earlier testified that it was Cole Doig's plan to wait until 9 seconds to have Peter's parachute fully open.
Yes, that was the reasonably safe plan, yes.
So if Cole Doig waited until 9 seconds, Peter's body would have fallen until 1,730 feet, correct?
Correct.
Let the record reflect, I am now drawing a red line through 9 and 1,730 and writing signal. Now, you would agree with me that it takes 1 second to reach for the cord and 3 seconds for the parachute to fully inflate?
Yes.
Let's count that out. 1, 2, 3, 4. So on June 21st, the day Peter Jones died, by the time Peter's parachute would have been fully open, his body would have fallen until 1,041 feet, correct?
Yes.
Let the record reflect, I am now drawing a red circle through 13 and 1,041 and writing open. Now, Mr. Schaefer, we can both agree that both of these red lines and circles are below the industry standard of when a skydiver's parachute should be fully open.
They are, but again, in my expert opinion, as long as the parachute was fully inflated by 1,000 feet, that would also be reasonably safe.
But you do agree with me that giving the signal at 9 seconds was right at the edge of safety.
It was.
I mean, even you wouldn't recommend it.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Because as an expert, you always open your parachute at 2,000 or 3,000 feet.
That is correct. I don't perform stunts in movies.
In fact, the lowest you have ever waited to have your parachute fully inflated is 1,200 feet.
That's correct.
And that was on accident because your primary didn't work and you had to rely on your reserve.
That is true, but I did still land safety even deploying my parachute at 12,000 feet or 1,200 feet.
Well, Mr. Schaefer, I am correct in saying that you did do a skydive in this case.
Correct.
Tried to recreate Peter's skydive with his equipment.
Yes, I was testing the equipment.
Yet you just testified that the lowest you have ever waited to have your parachute fully open is 1,200 feet.
Correct.
Meaning even you didn't wait until 1,041 feet when you tested Peter's skydive.
That is correct.
Like Cole Doig wanted Peter Jones to do on June 21st.
Correct, but it didn't end up happening.
Now, Mr. Schaefer, you also testified that you believe Cole Doig gave the signal at 9 seconds, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you weren't there for yourself to hear whether Cole Doig actually yelled pull.
I was not.
Instead, you're relying on your review from the file.
Yes.
And from reviewing the file, you know that someone else was in the control room that day.
Yes.
In fact, Sidney Gaskins was in the control room that day.
Yes.
And you read all of the evidence in this case.
I did.
So you know that Sidney Gaskins has a well-deserved reputation of being one of the few honest people in this town.
I did review that, yes.
And you know that Sidney Gaskins does not agree with Cole Doig that he yelled pull at 9 seconds.
Correct.
You also would agree with me that Cole Doig has described Sidney Gaskins as a straight shooter.
Yes.
Yet, when you reviewed the file, you know no one said that about Cole Doig.
That is correct.
But you did review an interview in the file, so you know that Cole Doig has admitted he lied to people before.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence.
Yes, Your Honor. Under 608B, we are allowed to inquire into Cole Doig's other acts as they relate to truthfulness on cross-examination, and this act does relate to truthfulness.
Your Honor, we would also raise a 403 objection. The probative value of this testimony is extremely low. The incident that opposing counsel is referring to occurred over a decade ago, and it's also highly prejudicial to the defendant because the jury is likely to give undue weight to the testimony and make a decision on an improper basis.
Your Honor, 403 is a very high standard to meet. The probative value certainly does not is substantially outweighed by the prejudicial effect. This whole case relies on Cole Doig's word versus Sidney Gaskins' word. Therefore, the probative value is certainly high and is not substantially outweighed by any prejudicial effect. Yes, Your Honor. Now, when you were reviewing the file, in your expert opinion, you based Your opinion on Cole Doig, giving it at 9 seconds, solely based on Cole Doig, what happened, said what happened?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Schaefer, you just testified that Dragon Studios is paying you to be here today.
Yes, they are. I have to make a living somehow. This is how I make my money. It's my job, so naturally that comes with charging a fee.
And does the fact that Dragon Studios is paying you affect your testimony in any way?
No, I'm an expert. It's my job to review the file in an unbiased way and provide truthful testimony.
Now, opposing counsel was also asking you about some of the industry standards of skydives. Based on your review of the file, was there anything that required Dragon Studios to adhere to industry standards?
No, based on my review of the file, there is no requirement that Dragon Studios abide by industry standards that wasn't in the stunt plan or the contract.
On the topic of the contract, was there anything in the contract that required Dragon Studios to provide Peter with an altimeter?
No, nothing in the contract mentioned anything about an altimeter.
Did Sky Stebbins' stunt plan mention an altimeter?
Sky Stebbins' stunt plan also said nothing about an altimeter.
No further questions, Your Honor.
This time, Your Honor, we call Cole Doig.
I do.
Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Cole Doig.
What's your occupation, Mr. Doig?
I'm a filmmaker. I write, direct, and produce movies.
Where do you work?
I'm the owner of Dragon Studios, which I founded about in 2006.
What is Dragon Studios?
It's a movie producing company.
What sorts of movies does Dragon Studios produce?
Well, in the past, we've done a variety of movies, but our main focus has been the All Lost franchise.
Now, you mentioned All Lost. Do you know the movies star Peter Jones?
Yes, I was the executive producer on all Lost movies.
What was your relationship with Peter Jones like?
It was pretty good. We were close. We went from colleagues to friends.
How well would you say that you know Peter Jones?
Very well. After working with him on over 6 movies, we became very close. I miss Peter a lot.
What was Peter Jones's role in the All Lost movies?
Well, Peter was the main star. He was a special agent, the name of Travis Harper, and he was known for the stunts he did in each of those movies.
Now, Mr. Doig, you mentioned stunts. If you were to see some photos of those stunts, would you recognize them?
Yes, I would recognize any stunts Peter's done in the past.
This time, I'll direct the court and opposing counsel's attention to what's been pre-marked for identification purposes as Exhibits 4 through 8. Let the record reflect I'm showing opposing counsel Exhibits 4 through 8. Your Honor, would you like a copy? Permission to approach the witness. And Mr. Doig, you've got those exhibits in front of you now. Do you recognize them?
Yes.
What are they?
Well, this first one,
Go ahead, sorry.
well, these are all the stunts he's completed in the past. And this first one here is Exhibit 4. This is Peter hanging off.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence. And this witness is testifying to exhibits that are not admitted into evidence yet.
Your Honor, I intend to admit those into evidence. I apologize for that. And as to the improper character objection, Your Honor, as stated earlier by my co-counsel, we do not intend to offer any of these instances of previous stunts for purposes of propensity or any improper character purposes. However, we intend to offer them for purposes of knowledge of Peter Jones's knowledge of planning and executing all of these stunts.
Well, in that case, we would raise a 403 objection. Exhibits 4 through 7 aren't even skydiving stunts, and therefore their probative value it's extremely outweighed by the prejudicial effect that the jury's not going to understand that this isn't being offered for propensity purposes of risk-taking.
Your Honor, if I may be heard. Exhibits 4 through 7, while they aren't skydiving stunts, the stunt that Peter Jones ultimately died performing also involves a motorcycle jump. So we do think with the probativeness of this evidence, the tendency is, with the probativeness standard being very low, these pieces of evidence again go to show Peter Jones' general knowledge of the risks and of planning and executing all of these stunts.
Counselor, I am going to sustain the objection. I know I allowed testimony previously with regard to the decedent's prior activities in and of themselves, but I do find that the photographs that are in exhibits 4 through 8 are highly prejudicial, so I'm going to sustain the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Doig, can you explain to us the stunt that Peter Jones did for the All Lost 7 movie? That's the movie that this case encompasses.
It was a stunt pretty similar to a halo stunt. He was jumping from a low altitude off a ramp, and then he would let go of a bike, his motorcycle. He drove off the ramp, and then release the motorcycle, open his parachute, and then parachute to the ground.
Now, can you explain to this jury what a halo jump stunt is?
Well, halo is a high altitude jump, but then you're opening your parachute at a low altitude.
So were all of the stunt attempts for All Lost 7 successful?
Yes. Yes, the ones on June 20th were.
So on June 21st, are you aware of what happened that day?
Yes, I am.
What happened?
On June 21st?
Yes.
Objection calls for a narrative.
Your Honor, I'm simply asking if the witness is aware of the general event of what occurred on June 21st, specifically Peter Jones's death.
I'm going to allow
So I'll ask that question again. Are you aware of what occurred on June 21st?
Yes, sir. I was there on June 21st.
And in regards to the movie, how did what happened on June 21st affect the movie?
Well, that was actually the first day of filming, but that stunt itself didn't actually come until 2/3 of the way through the movie.
Mr. Doig, how did the events on June 21st affect the general portion of the movie?
Well, because the scene wasn't completed, we didn't get to finish the entirety of the movie.
So whose idea was the stunt for All Lost 7 in the first place?
It was Peter's. Peter came up with ideas for all of his own stunts.
And did Peter Jones ever use stunt doubles?
No, Peter refused to use stunt doubles.
Now, I want to shift your focus specifically to All Lost 7. That's the movie that this case encompasses. Now, was there any sort of documentation outlining the stunt for this movie?
Yes, there was a contract that I was a party to, so it was Peter, as well as a stunt plan agreement attached to that contract.
And if you were to see copies of those documents, would you recognize them?
Yes.
This time, I'll direct the court and opposing counsel's attention to Exhibits 25 and 26, which have already been admitted. Person 2, approach the witness, Your Honor. Now, do you recognize those documents, Mr. Doig?
Yes, I do.
What are they?
This is the contract and release, and then this is still Exhibit 25.
And then what is Exhibit 26?
This is Exhibit 25.
Oh, I apologize. I gave you 2. What is Exhibit 26, Mr. Doig?
Now, Exhibit 26, this is the stunt plan agreement.
So I want to shift your focus specifically to Exhibit 25. Who signed that document?
I'm a party. Sidney Gaskins, Peter's agent, is a party, as well as Peter Jones.
Now, why did the 3 of you sign that contract?
Well, we were the main three parties that were involved in the negotiation of this contract.
So what was the general purpose of that document?
Well, overall, it basically outlines the promises and duties that Dragon Studios, as well as Peter, promised to the fulfillment of this movie, as well as the risk associated with filming this movie.
Now, you mentioned the risk associated with filming the movie. Can you explain to this jury what you mean by that?
Yes, sir. I mean, specifically in paragraph 4, you can see that Peter accepts the risk of death when filming this movie.
Now, you being the owner of Dragon Studios, what sorts of things did Dragon Studios agree to do in that contract?
We agreed to do things to the degree of setting a safe environment and stunt area for Peter.
So what specifically did Dragon Studios do to ensure Peter Jones's safety?
Well, I specifically, on behalf of Dragon Studios, hired a stunt coordinator.
And who was the stunt coordinator that you hired?
Sky Stebbins.
So what was Peter Jones's role in relation to planning for the stunt for the movie?
Well, Peter, it was his vision for it, but his role was to execute the idea of the stunt he came up with.
And did Peter do that stunt himself?
Yes, he did.
So what did Dragon Studios do after Peter Jones insisted on doing that stunt himself?
Well, can you repeat the question?
What specifically did Dragon Studios do in order to ensure Peter's safety after he insisted on doing that stunt himself?
All sorts of things. I mean, we had him wear an extra parachute. We provided the best equipment possible. We paid for all the equipment. Like I said earlier, we had hired a stunt coordinator.
So how much did all of that cost Dragon Studios?
I mean, over $1 million, which sounds like a lot, but we were heavily invested in his safety. It was well worth it to spend that on Peter.
So from the time at which all of these things were agreed upon in that contract to the time at which filming for the movie actually began, what was that time frame?
Over a year.
So after Dragon Studios spends $1 million over the course of a year preparing Peter Jones to do this stunt, when was the very first day of filming for the overall movie?
For the overall movie was June 20th, first day of filming.
And what was filmed on June 20th?
That was the day we began filming the stunt scene.
So you just said that that was the first day of filming. Was the stunt the very first scene in the movie?
No, the stunt scene wasn't supposed to actually occur until about 2/3 of the way through the movie.
Can you explain to this jury why this stunt was being filmed first, even though it did not occur in the movie until 2/3 of the way through?
Well, Peter said himself that if he didn't survive the stunt scene, there was no point of filming the rest of the movie.
Now, did Peter ever articulate that he knew the risks associated with the stunt?
Well, yes, he said it himself that if he did not survive this stunt, there'd be no point of filming the rest of the movie.
Mr. Doig, were you there on June 20th?
Yes.
What was supposed to happen to ensure Peter Jones's safety?
Well, Peter was supposed to go off the ramp, let go of the bike, pull his parachute, and land safely on the ground.
Now, after he hit the edge of the ramp, did he just instantly pull his parachute?
No, Peter would wait until 4 seconds after he left the ramp when I gave him the signal to pull his parachute.
How were you able to give him the signal to pull?
Well, I was in the control room, and I have a walkie-talkie that's connected directly to the earbuds that Peter had in while falling.
So how did the jumps go on June 20th?
Well, Peter absolutely nailed it.
How many jumps were done?
There were 6 stunts, 6 jumps that day.
And were all of them successful?
Yes, they were all successful.
Now, was that the last time that Peter Jones did the stunt for all Lost 7?
No, Peter did the stunt another time on June 21st, the next day.
So the stunt is done again the next day. What's different?
I mean, it's basically the exact same stunt, other than this time we agreed I'd be giving the signal at 9 seconds instead of 4. But other than that, it was really the exact same stunt.
Now, did Peter Jones know that the plan was for the signal to be given at 9 seconds?
Yes, me and Peter agreed on that.
Why were you waiting until 9 seconds?
Well, we needed the scene to be a little bit longer, and according to Sky Stebbins' calculations, as long as Peter pulled his parachute after my signal like he has every other time was playing time.
So where were you on June 21st?
I was in the control room.
What were you doing in the control room?
I was watching Peter on the monitor and watching the clock.
What were you watching for?
Well, I was watching for the clock hit 9 seconds.
And what was supposed to happen at 9 seconds?
I was supposed to give Peter the signal in 9 seconds. That's why I was watching.
Did you?
Absolutely.
So whenever you give Peter the signal at 9 seconds, how does Peter Jones react?
Well, Peter Jones didn't react at all.
So whenever you saw that Peter Jones didn't take your direction, how did you react?
Well, I mean, I saw him, his hands were still up. He wasn't reaching for the cord. That's when the panic set in. And I immediately radioed into my walkie-talkie again, deploy, deploy, deploy.
Did Peter respond then?
No.
Did Peter ever pull his parachute?
Peter eventually pulled his parachute.
How long did it take Peter to pull his parachute?
It was about at the 15-second mark, so about 5 to 6 seconds after he was supposed to pull his parachute.
So did he begin to slow down after his parachute deployed?
Yes, he slowed down and his parachute began to open.
So what happened after he began to slow?
Well, I mean, from the monitor, we saw the impact on the screen, and that's when we took the helicopter down to see Peter at the bottom, and that's when we saw his body, and Peter's dead. I mean, he was a close friend of mine, so when we got down there, I mean, I was crying when I saw him, very emotional. I was basically speechless.
Now, I understand that the situation is extremely emotional for you, Mr. Doig, but did you have a reason for Peter Jones to die on June 21st?
Absolutely not. Peter was more than a colleague to me. He was a close friend. I miss Peter very, very much.
In what way did Dragon Studios benefit financially from Peter Jones's death?
Benefit financially, not at all. That's actually the complete opposite. Peter was the star for all the All Lost movies. I mean, the production of them is over. He's actually made us well over Dragon Studios $3 billion throughout the production of these movies. We did not benefit financially at all.
So what did you do on June 21st to ensure Peter Jones's safety?
I gave Peter Jones the signal at 9 seconds, like me and Peter Jones agreed on.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Doig, you were just testifying to the stunt plan that we have marked as Exhibit 26, correct?
That's correct.
And if you were to see a copy of 26, you would recognize it, right?
Yes, ma'am. I have a copy right here.
Perfect. Let's take another look at that. I would like to direct the court and opposing counsel's attention to Exhibit 26, the stunt plan. Now, Mr. Doig, there's a whole section here. See it? That says to ensure performers' safety, the following precautions and preparations will be taken. And below it is a list of things that everybody agreed to do to ensure Peter's safety, correct?
Correct.
And that's your signature there at the bottom for yourself and for Dragon Studios?
Yes.
Which means that you and Dragon Studios agreed to adhere to the precautions and preparations written in this stunt plan.
Yes.
Okay. Take a look at the last bullet point on the list. Here it says a skydiver should have their parachute open and fully inflated before a skydiver descends below an elevation of 2,000 feet AGL above ground level. You see that, right?
I see that, yes.
Now, Mr. Doig, you learned a lot about skydiving working on this movie, haven't you?
Yes, way more than I did before.
And one thing that you know is that you need the parachute to be open and fully inflated by 2,000 feet above ground level, correct?
Yes, that's the industry standard.
You even told a Hollywood Today reporter that you knew that in June of 2023.
Yes.
You knew that on June 20th when Peter Jones performed this original stunt.
I knew that, yes.
And you knew it on the evening of June 20th when you asked Peter Jones to wait to deploy his parachute longer than 2,000 feet.
I knew 2,000 feet was the industry standard, yes.
Take another look at the last bullet point on the list. It says, studio's production team will tell performer to open his parachute 4 seconds after the motorcycle leaves the ramp. I read that correctly, didn't I, Mr. Doig?
Yes, you did.
Which means that when you signed this stunt plan, you agreed to give Peter the signal 4 seconds after his motorcycle left the ramp.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Doig, that stunt plan doesn't say 9 seconds, does it?
It does not. It says 4 seconds.
That stunt plan doesn't say 10 seconds, does it?
No, the stunt plan here says 4 seconds.
That stunt plan doesn't say, wait for Peter to realize he's about to hit the ground and let him pull his...
Your Honor, argumentative.
I'll rephrase, Your Honor. That stunt plan doesn't say Peter is to pull his parachute open on his own, does it?
No, but who's going to pull his parachute?
Now, Mr. Doig, let's talk about June 21st, the day that Peter died. During your direct, you told the jury that you waited for the clock to say 9 seconds before giving Peter the signal to deploy, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that means that you are not complying with what's written in this stunt plan. We can agree on that, correct?
Yes, we can agree that me and Peter changed the plan and agreed on 9 seconds.
But this stunt plan says 4 seconds and you waited until 9, and that is not the same. You would agree.
I would agree that 9 is not the same as 4.
Okay, so let's talk for just a minute about why you decided to change the stunt from waiting 4 seconds to waiting 9 seconds. Now, Mr. Doig, the original plan was for Dragon Studios to film Peter's motorcycle stunt on June 20th, correct?
Yes, we began filming on June 20th.
And June 20th was to be the only day of filming, right?
That was the original plan.
And Mr. Doig, that was the day that you were supposed to give Peter the signal 4 seconds after his motorcycle left the ramp.
Yes, and we did that.
You're exactly right, Mr. Doig. That is exactly what happened on June 20th. 6 times in a row, you yelled pull at 4 seconds.
Yes.
6 times in a row, Peter listened to your command.
Yes.
And 6 times in a row, Mr. Doig, Peter landed the stunt safely.
That's correct.
Now, despite those 6 successful takes of this stunt, you felt that the scene was too short.
I felt that the scene needed to be longer, yes.
You felt that the scene was insubstantial.
Yes, the scene needed to be more compelling.
So on the evening of June 20th, you approached Peter Jones and asked him that he would wait until 9 seconds to deploy his parachute.
Yes, I approached him and we agreed on 9 seconds.
Rather than 4.
Correct.
And Peter hesitated, didn't he?
Yes.
Peter was reluctant to change the stunt.
I'd say so.
So to convince him, you told Peter that Sky Stebbins gave you the green light on your new June 21st stunt idea.
Yes. The math, according to our calculations, worked out.
And Mr. Doig, you knew that Peter relied on Sky Stebbins to ensure the stunts were safe.
Yes.
Mr. Doig, you would lie to an actor to get a better scene, wouldn't you?
Objection, Your Honor, improper character evidence.
Your Honor, under 608B, we are allowed to inquire about this witness's prior acts as it relates to truthfulness. And this is the defendant himself in this case. He can testify to these prior acts.
I think I already ruled with regard to prior act issues. I will allow you to ask a blanket statement as to whether the witness went to truth.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Objection is to that extent as explained in my decision.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Doig, you would lie again, wouldn't you?
In What situation?
But you would lie again, Mr. Doig, in the
I,
situation to an actor?
yes, but not to Peter here when his life is in the line skydiving.
Mr. Doig, I don't take that you're willing to take the stand today and admit to the jury that you never yelled pull, correct?
Sorry, repeat the question.
I don't take that you're willing to admit to the jury today that on June 21st, you never yelled pull.
I yelled pull.
Okay, so you're sticking to your story that you gave Peter the signal at 9 seconds on June 21st.
Yes, ma'am.
But Mr. Doig, you know that there was someone else in that control room with you when you claimed to have yelled pull at 9 seconds.
Yes, me and Peter's agent, Sydney Gaskins, were the only two people in the control room on June 21st.
And you've worked with Sydney Gaskins many times, haven't you?
Yes, ma'am.
You consider her a straight shooter.
I'd say so.
And Mr. Doig, you know that Sydney Gaskins has a very well-deserved reputation for being one of the few honest people in this town.
Yes, you're not always going to like what Sydney Gaskins has to say, but she's usually a straight shooter.
Okay, so Mr. Doig, you've been in this courtroom with us for the entirety of this trial today, haven't you?
That is correct.
So you know that Sydney Gaskins took the stand and told the jury that you never yelled pull.
I heard that, yes.
I'm guessing you didn't like that testimony very much.
You can think what you want about it.
You definitely wouldn't agree with it though, right?
I would not say I agree with it.
But Mr. Doig, you know that although you may not always like what Sydney Gaskins has to say, you can trust it.
Yes, she's a straight shooter.
So after you and Sydney Gaskins saw Peter fall to his death, the two of you took a helicopter to the bottom of the mountain to see his body, right?
That is correct.
And that is extremely emotional for you. You just watched a good friend die.
Yes, the impact was, unbearable to watch.
And in that moment, standing over Peter's lifeless body, Sydney Gaskins looks you in the eye and asks, "How could you do this?" Correct?
She asked me that after we saw Peter's body. Yes.
And you remember responding, Mr. Doig, "I wanted a longer scene."
I remember her. That's the reason we shot the scene that day.
Continuing to scream at you, Sydney Gaskins demanded to know, why didn't you give him the signal at 9 seconds? Didn't she?
Yes, I love Sydney Gaskins, and she was just as emotional as I at that moment.
And Mr. Doig, you didn't respond.
No, I did not.
You didn't explain it.
No, it was a very emotional time.
You didn't apologize.
No, it was a very emotional time.
You didn't deny it.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
No, it was a very emotional time.
Mr. Doig, in those critical moments, you remained absolutely silent.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Doig, how was the scene for June 21st, how was that come up with, the plan for that scene?
Well, it was the night before. It was agreed upon in a conversation between me, Peter, and Peter's agent.
So, did Peter Jones agree to the 9-second mark?
Yes, Peter agreed then, and then he did this time the next day.
So, did you give the signal at 9 seconds?
Yes, sir. I gave the signal at 9 seconds, like I was supposed to, and that me and Peter agreed on.
Did Peter Jones respond like he was supposed to?
No, Peter did not respond. If he did, he might still be here today.
Nothing further.
Any further witness?
Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor, we're ready.
Let me check in with the jury. If you need to raise your hand. And you're good to go. We're gonna move straight into closing arguments. I'll hear from, I'm not sure which, who was giving plaintiffs closing, but maybe.
May it please the court. 9, silence. 10, silence. 11, silence. 12, 13, 14, 15. Silence. Every second counted. Every second that passed, Peter Jones's body was closer to the ground. With every second, Peter's likelihood of survival was quickly diminishing. 6 seconds of silence. 6 seconds that Cole Doig should have yelled one word: pull. Peter's death was preventable. And who is ultimately responsible for his death? The answer to that question is in Cole Doig's silence. Cole Doig should have given Peter the signal to deploy, and he didn't. And that is the sole reason that Peter Jones is dead. Members of the jury, the silence in this case tells a story far more compelling than any words could begin to express. The facts and the testimony that you have heard today display what Dragon Studios could have done, should have done, and would have done if it weren't for Cole Doig wanting to film a longer stunt scene. Cole Doig was willing to do anything for the audience, even if it meant putting Peter's life at risk. As the plaintiff, we have the burden of proof. We had to prove that Dragon Studios was negligent by a preponderance of the evidence, which means we needed to prove 3 elements were more likely true than not. First, we had to demonstrate that Dragon Studios failed to exercise ordinary care under the circumstances. Second, we needed to show that Peter Jones suffered harm. Members of the jury, this second element is undisputed by either party. We know Peter Jones suffered harm because he died, and unfortunately, that is why we are here today. And the third element was to prove that because of Dragon Studios' negligence, Peter Jones suffered such harm. Here in the Central District of California, we don't even have to prove that Dragon Studios was the sole cause in Peter's death. Our burden is to prove that Dragon Studios was a substantial factor, and we absolutely met that burden. As we told you in our opening statement, we were going to prove Dragon Studios' negligence with what they could have done, should have done, and would have done if it weren't for Cole Doig's anything for the audience objective. So let's break this down. First, Dragon Studios could have done many things during the filming of this movie that could have prevented Peter's death. Dragon Studios could have given Peter an altimeter to wear on his wrist. The defense's own expert was forced to admit that he would have given Peter an altimeter to wear during the filming of this stunt. And had Peter been given this device, a device so small, the size of a wristwatch, he could have seen his altitude levels and known when to deploy. But Cole Doig said no. Cole Doig found this small device to be weak and distracting. Cole Doig saying no and not implementing this measure of precaution, that's negligence. And that's just one negligent act. Dragon Studios could have had Peter start from a higher altitude. Dragon Studios could have made Peter start from a higher altitude and that way have a longer fall for the scene to proceed. All of these things that Dragon Studios could have done but chose not to shows you the extent of their negligence. We also showed you what Dragon Studios should have done. Dragon Studios should have adhered to the contract. Members of the jury, as you deliberate today, take a good hard look at Exhibits 25 and 26. What you will see is that Dragon Studios should have given Peter the signal to deploy at 4 seconds, just as they were required to do. Everyone agreed to it. Peter Jones, Sidney Gaskins, Cole Doig himself. And the fact that he didn't give the signal to deploy shows you the extent of their negligence. Dragon Studios should have finished filming after the 6 successful takes on June 20th. Dragon Studios should have made the call to deploy at 4 seconds. These 6 stunts on June 20th, they were executed properly, and he landed them safely. And Cole Doig should have followed suit on June 21st. Cole Doig should have adhered to this contract. And Sky Stebbins took the stand today and told you herself she never gave Cole Doig the green light on this new June 21st stunt idea. Cole Doig should have listened to Sky Stebbins. And instead, he lied to his actor to get the scene that he wanted. Cole Doig should have made the signal to deploy. He should have yelled, screamed, begged for Peter to pull his parachute cord open and deploy the parachute. And instead, he chose silence, a silence so deafening it echoed the control room and sealed Peter's fate. And on June 21st, when Peter finally pulled the parachute cord open on his own, it was too late. Peter crashed into the ground at a speed that left him lifeless. Sidney Gaskins' raw emotion in that moment was palpable. Screaming at Cole Doig, she demanded to know, "How could you do this?" And Cole Doig said nothing. Cole Doig remained silent. He didn't explain. He didn't apologize. He didn't deny it. A silence where accountability should have been. As you deliberate today, I urge you to consider what this silence means. It is an admission of guilt, an admission that Cole Doig caused Peter's death. We just talked about all of the things that Dragon Studios could have done, should have done, and would have done if it weren't for Cole Doig failing to exercise ordinary care under the circumstances. That's negligence. Cole Doig's silence caused Peter's death, which is why when you were presented with a jury verdict form today and it asks you, did plaintiff prove that the defendant's negligence was a cause of Peter's death? You need to check yes. Thank you.
Your Honor, do I have permission to use the jury verdict form during my closing argument? Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Members of the jury, what happened to Peter Jones on June 21st was unbelievably tragic. He was a husband, a father, a friend. Peter was the world's greatest movie star. But Peter was the world's greatest movie star because he did stunts that no other actors would. In fact, he loved doing stunts that no other actors would. So you have to ask yourselves, why would no other actors agree to do these stunts? Because the risks were undeniable. And Peter knew that. Peter planned these stunts himself. Peter wanted to take those risks. And then he went off script and he pushed the limits too far. Peter knew the script. He just didn't follow it. Members of the jury, I want to be upfront with you. It brings my co-counsel and I no joy to stand in front of you today and point fingers. As I said before, what happened to Peter Jones on June 21st was nothing short of tragic. And not a single person in this courtroom denies that. But because the plaintiff initiated this action, the law now requires us to point fingers. Today, the plaintiff had the burden of proving to you that Dragon Studios more likely than not caused Peter Jones' death. We chose to take on our own burden as well. We took on the burden to show you that Peter knew the risks of the stunt, that he accepted those risks, and that he ultimately caused his own death. Throughout this trial, the plaintiff has been unable to meet their burden. The plaintiff has not been able to prove that Dragon Studios caused Peter Jones' death. You heard both Skye Stebbins and Blair Schaefer tell you that the stunt was safe. And you heard Cole Doig tell you about all of the practice Dragon Studios required Peter to do. And I mean, think about it. Why would Dragon Studios want to jeopardize Peter's life? The plaintiff's theory makes no sense. If they were up here saying they're upset that Cole Doig wanted to wait until 9 seconds instead of 4 to yell pull, okay, we could argue about that. But to get up here and say that Cole Doig never yelled pull, that he intentionally waited until Peter crashed to the ground to his death, we know that didn't happen. Peter made Dragon Studios billions of dollars at the box office. Peter was their highest grossing actor. Peter was willing to take risks that no other actor would take. Dragon Studios had absolutely no incentive to just let him die. Dragon Studios spent $1 million on a year's worth of practice just to keep him safe. So at the outset, you should question what the plaintiff is telling you about what happened. And then reject it. Because there is no way Cole Doig watched Peter fall to the ground to his death and remained silent. This is your verdict form. Question number 1 asks, did the plaintiff prove that Dragon Studios' negligence caused Peter Jones' death? They haven't. The plaintiff has not been able to prove that Dragon Studios was negligent or that it caused Peter Jones' death. The answer to that question is no. But that's not the only reason to find in favor of Dragon Studios. The evidence you saw and heard today has allowed us to prove that Peter was negligent and that he assumed the risk that caused his death for 3 reasons. First, Peter knew the risks of the stunt. Second, Peter accepted the risks of the stunt. And third, Peter went off script when he did the stunt. So let's take those one at a time. First, Peter knew the risks of the stunt. And how do we know that? Because Peter told us himself. And despite what the plaintiff says, the answer is not in the silence. The answer is in Peter Jones' own words. Peter said there's so many things that could go wrong. And you heard his agent admit that on the stand today. Peter knew there was a chance he could hit the mountain wall. Peter knew there was a chance his parachute wouldn't open. Peter knew there was a chance that he would open his parachute too late. And that's exactly what happened on June 21st. Because Peter knew the script. He just didn't follow it. And yet, despite all of those risks, Dragon Studios still tried to mitigate them. You heard testimony today from Blair Schaefer, an expert in skydiving who's been in the industry for 30 years. Blair Schaefer told you that the stunt was safe. Blair Schaefer told you that Dragon Studios gave Peter adequate safety resources. And Blair Schaefer told you that no one is going to die if their parachute is open and fully inflated by 1,000 feet above ground level. But the plaintiff argues that that's not industry standard. And we agree. It's not. But the verdict form isn't going to ask you if the stunt was industry standard because the law doesn't require it to be. And regardless, it was Peter who planned this stunt. It was Peter who wanted to wait until 10 seconds to pull his parachute. Again, you heard his agent admit that today. And she even tried to change his mind. And Cole Doig offered other options. Dragon Studios could have edited the footage, could have used CGI, could have used body doubles. But Peter didn't want any of that, even though he knew the stunt was risky. He knew waiting until 4 seconds was risky. But he chose to do the stunt anyways, and now the plaintiff wants to point the finger at Dragon Studios. The plaintiff wants you to blame Dragon Studios for Peter's own choices. Which brings me to my second point. Peter not only knew the risks of the stunt, but he accepted them. Peter chose to film this stunt first because he said, if I don't survive this stunt, there's no point in having the rest of the movie already filmed. Members of the jury, think about that. Peter knew he might die performing this stunt. And we don't have to speculate about that. But he chose to do the stunt anyways because he accepted that risk. Peter even signed a contract accepting that risk. His agent, Sidney Gaskins, signed a contract accepting that risk. The contract for All Law 7 says, performer accepts the risks, including the risk of death. But the plaintiff wants you to think that this contract is only for June 20th. But you can see for yourselves, nowhere in this contract or the stunt plan does it say June 20th. Members of the jury, assumption of risk is an absolute defense. That means that Dragon Studios cannot be found liable because Peter assumed the risk that caused his death. So in question number 2 on your verdict form asks, did the defendant prove that Peter Jones assumed risk that caused his death? The answer to that question, yes. But there's still a third reason to find in favor of Dragon Studios. Peter went off script when he did the stunt. Sky Stebbins was forced to admit that Peter wanted the longest scene possible. Peter wanted to wait as long as possible to pull his parachute to get the longer scene. So when Cole Doig told Peter to pull exactly at 9 seconds, Peter chose not to. Because Peter knew the script. He just didn't follow it. And so when the plaintiff tells you that Cole Doig never yelled pull, reject it. Cole Doig yelled pull exactly at 9 seconds, and Peter chose not to pull his parachute because he wanted the longer scene. Question number 3 on your verdict form asks, did the defendant prove that Peter Jones' negligence caused his death? The answer to that question is yes. It was Peter's own negligence that caused his death. No one else's. And so when question number 4 asks you to allocate responsibility between the parties, the number next to Peter Jones is 100%. Peter chose to do this stunt. Peter chose to accept the risks of this stunt. And Peter chose not to pull his parachute when he was supposed to. Members of the jury, Peter knew the script. He just didn't follow it. Thank you.
Members of the jury, this case is simple, really. It comes down to a he said, she said. Cole Doig says he yelled pull at 9 seconds. Sidney Gaskins says he never did. So, who should you believe? Cole Doig took the stand this evening and told you that himself. Although you may not always like what Sidney Gaskins has to say, you can trust it. Think about it. Who has more to gain from lying today? Not Sidney Gaskins. Cole Doig and Dragon Studios stand to lose their money, their reputation, everything today. Of course, Cole Doig would be willing to lie to save himself and his company. He told you he's lied before, and he would do it again. Now, the defense has tried to confuse you on the issues of assumption of risk and comparative negligence. Don't let them. First, the defense argues that Peter Jones assumed the risk of his death in the contract that we have marked as Exhibit 25. As you go back to the jury deliberation room this evening, take a good hard look at Exhibits 25 and 26. The only stunt that Peter Jones accepted the risks of was that original stunt plan, the one where Cole Doig was to give Peter the signal at 4 seconds. This stunt plan doesn't say 9 seconds. This stunt plan doesn't say 10 seconds. This stunt plan doesn't say anything about Cole Doig's brand new June 21st stunt idea. Peter Jones never accepted the risks of that stunt that occurred on June 21st. Members of the jury, Cole Doig knew the script. And it was Cole Doig that didn't follow it. So, when you were presented with your jury verdict form this evening, and it asks you, did the defendant prove that Peter Jones assumed the risk that caused his death? You must check no. Second, the defense argues that Peter Jones caused his own death. Take another look at Exhibit 25. The contract for the All Lost 7 movie required Peter to take instruction from Dragon Studios in all aspects. All Peter Jones did on June 21st was wait for the signal to deploy as he was contractually required to do. That signal never came. Cole Doig never yelled pull. Cole Doig and Dragon Studios caused Peter's death. Which is why, when your jury verdict form asks you, did defendant prove that Peter Jones's negligence was a cause of his death? You must check no. Members of the jury, the defense stood before you this evening and told you, if we were upset that Dragon Studios wanted to change the script to waiting 9 seconds rather than 4, that we could argue about that. But members of the jury, that is quite literally what we are arguing this evening. The defense's own expert, as well as our expert, they have both testified this evening that waiting 9 seconds is cutting it way too close. And it is not the decision that they would have made, even as an expert. Cole Doig negligently changed the script. And then he got up there in the control room and he hesitated and said absolutely nothing in the most critical moments of the filming of this movie. Cole Doig negligently failed to follow the stunt plan. Which is why this jury verdict form means that Cole Doig and Dragon Studios caused Peter's death, and they acted with negligence in this case. We ask that you find Dragon Studios and Cole Doig liable for negligence and hold them accountable for Peter's death. Members of the jury, Cole Doig himself knows that he acted with negligence in this case. Because the answer to what killed Peter Jones is in Cole Doig's silence. Thank you.
Right, members of the jury, you have sufficiently been charged on the law. You are to follow the law, follow all the instructions that I gave you in your deliberations. And at this time, I will have you recess to the jury deliberation room. And I will rely on how about one person. How about Alexis Woodard, since you're trying to put together since lunch today? I'm going to appoint you as one person. Let us know when y'all have reached a decision. And we'll be recessed. Now, having said that, y'all go around and let the jury go somewhere.
Where we go?
I don't know.
I guess so.
Y'all won.
I'm only in charge inside this room. Your spot.
You already filled out the ballot, or do you need to do it?
Okay, so for
Okay,
the,
then I'll just collect them.
I'm gonna give y'all your document. But everybody else in the audience, no, you're not gonna give this. Back up the jury is deliberating. You take a bathroom break. You're free to leave, but you're also free to stay.
She's taking off.
I'm just gonna tag it and
You might ask.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it right here because I'm going back there to tally and I don't wanna.
I just want to make sure the people watching at home get the
And should I face this way then?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I guess I have to face the 12 feet.
Great. 18 people still watching.
Isn't it?
Live stream.
Thoughts on ethical advocacy. Since this is a professionalism event, that's why we invited Judge Cherry to be here and to share her thoughts with you. So all of this is part of the professionalism event. We want y'all to stay and listen to Judge Cherry's remarks. And as she gives you her thoughts on ethical advocacy and the advocacy that we saw tonight, we're going to go in the back and tally up the jury score sheets. And then we'll come back out in just a few moments and we will award the trophies to the runner-up and the winner of tonight's competition. So if y'all will just kind of hang tight for a few minutes, listen attentively and respectfully to Judge Cherry, and then we'll be back to do awards shortly.
Okay, now, so what I said before though, if anyone needs to take a bathroom break, it's while I'm talking, leave, just come back. But it will not bother me at all if you get up, just come back in. You'll miss my amazing comments if you do, but anyway. First of all, I want to congratulate all of you. I was struck the entire trial thinking, just wow. I'm going to say that you all have done just as well, if not better than some attorneys who appear in front of me sometimes. So just kudos to the preparation and work that you all put into this. Also, one thing that I was very pleased to see, all four of you were very courteous to each other. You were zealously advocating your position, but you were respectful and courteous to each other, and you were respectful and courteous to the court. I know that you all are in school together and that you know each other, and sometimes that makes that a little easier, but there are a lot of times, and you may find this challenge when you enter into practice, balancing being a zealous advocate for your client, and particularly when you don't know the person on the other side of your case, who you may disagree with how they handle something, or they may manage to push every single button that you have. And so it can be challenging when you practice law, how you balance that. But you are all well on your way, because I think foundationally that needs to be where you come from, is being respectful and being professional. I do want to just put in a plug. Being respectful and professional does not mean being a doormat or letting someone take advantage of you, or not advocating as you need to advocate, and also being respectful to the court. If you disagree with a ruling that a judge does, or anything that the judge does, you can respectfully create the record that you need to create, because judges are human too. And if they make a mistake or issue a legal decision or opinion, you need to mount your objection to create in a record for purposes of appeal. I know as a trial judge, I'm trying to make the right decision, and I'm making the best decision that I can at the time with the information I got in front of me. And sometimes I get it wrong, which is why a lot of times the appellate courts, we do get a good level of discretion depending on what the issue is, because during the course of a trial, a lot of times things are coming fast and you're just making the best decision that you can. But you as advocates, don't be afraid to object. Even if the judge rules against you 3 or 4 times, you keep making the objections that you need to make. And I'm going to use that
as a platform to make a couple of observations. I think, Ms. Suttles, am I pronouncing it? You did a fantastic job with those exhibits. I think that you did a great job trying to get them in because I had already given a ruling. I can't remember in what context, but I know that I had given a ruling allowing testimony about the deceased being aware of the risks with stunts. And so in line with that prior ruling, it would stand to reason that I would allow photographs in as evidence of the stunts. And frankly, I was going to until you made your 403 argument. And I don't know if that was off the cuff or you were prepared for that. I am going to say I got a little cheat sheet. That was not on my cheat sheet for objections, and you changed my mind because the pictures were somewhat prejudicial. So now that's a decision that could have gone either way, but I wanted to give you a special shout out for that. You thought quickly on your feet, and you did change my mind with that objection. There was another objection. You all handled the objections very respectfully and very well. And I think there might have been one time, it might have been with you, Ms. Schaefer, that I didn't give you an opportunity somebody I did not give an opportunity to make a further argument. If that happens to you, it's okay to interrupt the judge. And I think, Mr. Spradley, you at one point did say, if I may, Your Honor, because you might have gotten the sense that I was getting ready to rule. In that case, I was ruling in your favor. But you handled that really well in terms of, if I may. And you'll learn little catchphrases to interrupt the judge. And I'd love to speak for most judges, and I can't. I'll speak for myself. I want you to get the record that you need. And so if I have not given you an opportunity, it isn't because I don't want to give you an opportunity. You'll know if the judge gets frustrated with you. But even if the judge gets frustrated with you, you make the objection that you need to make. You create the record that you need for your client. You all had great presence. You all had great voices. Sometimes I can see with jurors that they can't hear what the attorney's saying. That was not an issue with any of you. You all did that really well. I did want to highlight, be careful with your hand gestures as I sit up here and use my hands, but you want to be careful that it doesn't become distracting, and you want to be careful with pointing, especially if you point at the jury. So just be mindful of that. Sometimes, and you want to be sensitive to how you're coming across to the jury. Sometimes jurors will be put off a little bit if they feel like someone is pointing too much or gesturing too much. One thing I did want to say is, Ms. Harris, you did a really good job at not using your hands very much, so that when you did, it was particularly effective. So I just highlight that of the four, I noticed that a little more. I also think that came across well because under this set of facts, it's kind of tough for the defense when someone has died. I mean, that's just tough. And not using your hands in the closing, I thought your closing was fantastic. You used your hands some, but you were calm and you came across calmly, and that conveyed the tragedy of the situation. You weren't patronizing. It was just a softer tone, and then you increased your tone, and the points you made were spot on. You weren't saying that the deceased was a bad person. but you were highlighting his choices. And I liked some of the words that you used rather than saying he was negligent. I know you did at one point, and you have to, but when you're dealing with someone who has died and you're having to focus on accusatory things, you twisted it a little bit and you said accepted the risk as opposed to assumed the risk. And there were just some word choices that I don't know if you gave a lot of thought to, but it came across to me that you did. It was very effective. And then you did increase your voice a little bit. The change in the tone of your voice was very effective. One thing I want to point at both of you, I wouldn't normally allow anyone to use the verdict form in their closing. You were good to ask permission, and I would have told you no, but for having let you use it. Now, here's the dilemma that you could have been faced with is that I allowed her to use it, and then you asked and I told you no. Or she objected, and I would have sustained that objection, even though she had done it because you didn't object to it. Now, that's going to be something you will know in advance. You'll know in a pretrial. That's just something that I'm not aware of any judges who will let you use the verdict form when you're making your closing arguments. So if you want to, and I'm not sure that either of you needed to, I get that it's an effective visual for the jury, but I don't know that you needed to. But I would advocate asking in advance. You don't want that kind of surprise at the end. Now, I just talked about hand use. Now, Ms. Shaver, I was going to say, I thought your opening was very effective using your fingers and counting the seconds down because it created, anticipation's not the right word, but it created tension. And I thought it was very effective. And I highlighted that after I was going to comment not using your, you want to get the out of the use of your hands. And I thought that was very effective. So Mr. Spradley, you did a great job in your opening. The only thing I noticed was at one point you said, we don't have to prove anything. You do on an affirmative defense. And so that's not a really big thing, but be careful in your opening. If plaintiff's counsel had objected, I would have sustained the objection because it's not the correct law. I'm not sure anybody else probably noticed it. I just did because I understood the point you were trying to make. So that's me being incredibly picky because I didn't have anything else to say about your opening. The one thing I wanted to let both sides know, I had the factual underpinnings to understand this issue about lying and the releasing of the bees and that, but the way in which it came up, and I appreciate that y'all are doing a condensed version and you've got time limitations, but it was awkward because it came up with the expert, and so the defendant hadn't testified. And the way it came up with the expert, I didn't have any foundation for it. It was incredibly awkward. So in a different scenario, I might have ruled differently. But at the end of the day, when the defendant was on the stand, it really came across like you were just getting to admit that he was a liar and that's his character, that he's a liar. And I'm not going to let that in. So I just want you to know from my perspective, in a different world, I would have made both sides flesh that out more. It's just because I know our time constraints. So I want you to know that ruling from me on any given day could have been very different. It's just I didn't feel like for trial purposes, that I had what I needed to really parse out the arguments for that that objection and that issue. And the reason I wanted to highlight it was in your rebuttal, you made comments, something about he lied before and he'll do it again. And I'm not entirely sure I let that testimony in. I allowed you to ask him if he was a liar. You can ask him that, and hopefully most people are going to say, no, I'm not. But that was why I allowed that question, was that just in theory, you're asking him whether he's being truthful or not being truthful. I hadn't allowed all of that contextual stuff that he lied about the bees and that type of thing. I'm not giving you too hard of a time because I'm not entirely sure my ruling was that clear on it. But you do want to be careful what you say in closing argument is actually evidence. But both of you did a good job in closing to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And that's the fun part to me in a closing, is taking all of the evidence and arguing to the jury why they should view that evidence through a lens favorable to your client, whichever one. But both of you did a really good job pulling those pieces together. I'm just also going to say, y'all, all of you who with directs did a great job. I actually think directs are a little harder to do than cross examinations. And I don't know who has taught y'all how to do cross examinations, but they were great. Every single, okay, well, they really were, because every single one of them were varied. They were varied. It wasn't a series of, you didn't do this, did you? And you didn't do this, did you? I mean, the way you asked the leading questions, the answer to your question was just a little different every time. Sometimes it is effective to go, you didn't do this, did you? You didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. But there is a real art to asking questions on cross effectively. And every single one of you varied it. And I just smiled. I was very impressed. And I could go on, but I think our jury might be back. And I just was delighted to get to judge this again. This is so much fun for me, but you've all done a really, really good job. I'm not sure I'm helping everyone else in terms of professionalism comments, but just know that you just saw 4 people do a really good job. So thank y'all for that very much. Yeah. Bess, do you need that?
Yes, please. Do I need to turn it on? Is it on? Are we good?
No, you're good. That's weird.
Okay, awesome. I just want to thank everyone for coming. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. A special thanks, Judge Cherry. We appreciate you so much. I know you've been around a few times, and we really appreciate your time. Same with the jurors. You all are awesome. Thank you for spending your evening with us. We really appreciate it. Professor Chapman, you obviously prepared them so well, so thank you. It was so much fun to watch. And without further ado, we're going to announce the results. Okay, so for the runners-up of the Internal Trial Ad Competition 2024, we have the plaintiff team, Amanda and Logan. And for our winners, you all were awesome. Both of you were awesome. Congratulations. We have Brett and Sydney.